Welcome to Walgreens. Looking for a holiday gift?
Sort of. My cousin Freddie showed up to surprise us.
Oh, sounds like a real nice surprise.
Exactly. So now I have to get him a gift, but I haven't gotten my bonus yet. So if we could make it something really nice, but also not break the bank, that'd be perfect.
How about a Keurig for 50% off?
Bingo.
Savings all season. The holiday road is long. We're with you all the way. Walgreens. Offer valid November 26th through December 27th. Exclusions apply.
At Lowe's, before the holidays is the perfect time for upgrades and upkeep. During Black Friday, get up to 50% off select major appliances and buy more to save more with up to an additional 25% off when you bundle select major appliances. Plus, grab select DeWalt 20-volt max drill or impact driver kits for just $99. Lowe's. We help, you save. Valid through 12/3. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
A warmer from Evo! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre, who does such excellent work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We're going to be chatting with him a little bit about the ACC-SEC Challenge, conference play getting started up for the Big Ten and a few others, a few teams that he's feeling bullish/bearish on, the overreaction that we see from Feast Week, and so much more. So we've got a lot to dive in on there in the final segment. Going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast by that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. Everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better. Better is making it better to be able to get into the game, because when you go to BETR.app, just type in the promo code of VSiNPod, that is VSINPOD, that gets you $10 free to get started. All you need to do, take a look at a player and their stat line, determine whether or not they're going to be going over or under, and you're all set to go. And we're all set to go to take a look back at what was a very fun day of college basketball on Tuesday. Tried to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
ACC looking a little bit better in the ACC-SEC Challenge, considering they only won 2 games in this a season ago, but they have been able to rebound here. As Duke, it was nip and tuck. They got up 12 at the half against Florida. They just barely hold on for dear life, 67-66. They do find a way against Florida, as for both teams, they were rough from 3, 7-28 from distance for Florida, 7 of 26 for Duke, but Duke had on their side, Cameron Boozer was able to supply 29 points, 6 rebounds, took this game over. As Thomas Howell, he was able to supply 24 points. He just did not get a lot off the bench for Florida. They only went with a 7-man rotation, and for Duke, they have Malik Brown be able to make a nice impact for them, and Duke wins the turnover battle 13-12. They do lose that rebound battle 44-33, but in the end, Duke finds a way to just be able to get the job done over there at Cameron Indoor. You saw North Carolina go on the road and take it to Kentucky in a surprisingly low-scoring slog, 67-64 final in this one. As for North Carolina, they go 6-20 from 3, which isn't great, but Kentucky was 1 of 13 from the outside. Man, not great to say the least. As for Kentucky, they did a solid job taking care of the ball. They won the turnover battle 12-9, but man, could not find it from 3. Otega Owe was able to give the team 16 points, but North Carolina, they also win the rebound battle by a count of 41-30. As for UNC, Caleb Wilson, he was able to supply 6 assists, 12 rebounds, 15 points, just did a little bit of everything. And then you had a double-double from Henry Vassar, 17 points, 10 rebounds. So that was big for the ACC, and you had Syracuse as an underdog be able to pull it off against Tennessee, 62-60 the final. Syracuse right now, top 10 team in the country, trips points allowed on a per possession basis. For Tennessee, they have nobody to blame but themselves for this loss. 8 of 15 at the free throw line. Syracuse was just as bad, 13-22 at the charity stripe. But how about William Kyle? 6 blocks, 7 rebounds, 10 points. He had Nate Kings, who has been rough with his shooting all season long, step up, supplied the team with 19 points, and they did this without Donnie Freeman as well. And for this Tennessee team, it's been turnovers that have really been costly for them. They had 17 of them in this game. Jalen Carey did come off the bench. He had 22 points, 9 assists, but Jacoby Gillespie, 7 assists, 10 points. Rest of the backcourt did not provide too much, with Bishop Boswell and Cade Phillips combining for 5 points between the two of them. Felix Zapara, only 2 points. So Syracuse, a very nice, impactful win for the ACC. And then Virginia Tech in overtime, 86-83. They find a way to get the job done. This was tied at the end of regulation because B.G. Johnson had the ball in his hands with like 15 seconds remaining, did not drive it till like 2 seconds remaining, kicked it out, and they didn't get a shot off before overtime. So not great by South Carolina, to say the least. But for Virginia Tech, what was great was Amani Hansberry giving you 22 points, 14 rebounds for Virginia Tech. They win the rebound battle 37-28. This despite the fact that they're dealing with the injury to Toby Lual. And for Virginia Tech, Ben Hammond and Jaden Schuett off the bench, they combined to be able to supply 28 points for South Carolina, just 8 of 30 from three-point. Michi Johnson, even though he did have that flub at the end of regulation, he did still give the team 18 points, 6 rebounds, but not enough on this day for South Carolina, even though they win the turnover battle by a count of 9-8. Now, you did see some SEC teams become triumphant, as Oklahoma 86-68. They do lay in base Wake Forest in this one, as Wake Forest just 8 of 30 from three-point. Oklahoma just 8 of 25 themselves, but Oklahoma just ate up the glass, 42-24. They win the rebound battle. Muhammad Wagyu, 14 rebounds, pair of blocks, 11 points in this one. Nigel Pack and Xavier Brown, only about 24 points between the two of them, but Makai Mason needed more than the 7 points that you got out of him. Drew Harris, he was able to supply 22 points, but for Wake Forest, they just were not able to do a great job on the glass. They didn't get it going from three and shot 34% overall from the floor. And then Georgia absolutely pounds Florida State, 107-73 the final. Georgia, 11 of 30 from three. They've been a rough three-point shooting team. They busted out here with Jeremiah Wilkerson going 4 of 8 from the outside, 22 points. Blue Kane, and Catchings, they were both able to give you 17 points. Georgia wins the battle on the glass, 48-27. And Florida State is living by the three and dying by the three, and they went 8 of 30 from three, and they went 9 of 18 at the free throw line. For Georgia, they actually lose their turnover battle 14-11, but not enough for Florida State to even remain halfway lively in this one. And then for the SEC, you saw Texas A&M go on the road, get the job done against Pittsburgh, this by a count of 81-73. As for Pittsburgh, 8 of 26 from three-point range. For Texas A&M, they go 9 of 23 from three, and even though Pittsburgh had a nice performance off the bench from Nojas Edestirtis, he was able to give the team 15 points. Texas A&M, they had Rashawn Agee on their side, 13 rebounds, 21 points for a Texas A&M team that won the turnover battle 11-9. They win the rebound battle 36-32. So they go on the road. They find a way to get the job done, and so does Miami. Miami, they win 75-66. They're a road team that got the job done. That was one for the ACC, and both teams shot it well from three. Ole Miss, 11-26 from three, 11-25 for Miami, but what was very costly in this game for Ole Miss was getting pounded on the glass, 45-29. Miami wins that rebound battle. Miami overcomes 19 turnovers to get the job done here as Malik Renew. 6 turnovers, but 6 boards, 15 points. He had 9 rebounds out of Shelton Henderson, who came up in a big way. And for Ole Miss, the lone starter that had more than 10 points in this one was Ben Prinkins, who had 11 points. So that was not great, to say the least. A.J. Storr, 6 points. He's been up, down, all around throughout his college basketball career, and that was a little bit of a downer. And then you saw Notre Dame get it done against Missouri, 76-71, as Missouri had full control of this game in the first half, but then let go of the rope. They go 6-21 from three, and for Notre Dame, they just kept firing up the threes, 11-33 from the outside. Marcus Burton was able to give the team 18 points. Cole Kurta, he comes off the bench. He goes 4 of 7 from three-point. For Notre Dame, they actually lose the turnover battle 13-12, but for Notre Dame, 15 out of 18 at the free throw line, 17 out of 25 for Missouri. That turned out to be a big difference maker in this one. And you also saw Cal in a game that did not involve the ACC versus SEC challenge get a win but no cover over Utah, 79-72 final in that one. And speaking of former Pac-12 teams, you've got Big Ten action that is going on, and I do have to do this podcast before midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern. As I'm doing this, USC up 71-68, so we'll see how that materializes. But in terms of the first night of Big Ten Conference play, Michigan State was able to wall up Iowa, a rude awakening to Ben McCollum in Big Ten Conference play, 71-52 the final. As for Michigan State, they only go 3 of 12 from 3, but they went 22 of 25 at the free throw line. They did a nice job in terms of just winning this rebound battle, 37-18. That's where the D2 guys just are having a tough time matching up with Michigan State. Jackson Kaler down low, 12 points, 11 rebounds. Jeremy Fierce, he only had a 2 of 6 shooting night from the floor, but he was able to get to the free throw line, 10 of 10 at the charity stripe. He had 6 assists in this game, and Iowa actually wins the turnover battle 14-11, but Bennett Sturts, he was a lone guy that was able to give the team more than 7 points, 14 points out of him. So Iowa unable to get it done there. And for Purdue, they do not cover the closing number of right around 16.5 to 17, but a rock solid win over Rutgers, 81-65 the final for Purdue. They go 10 of 26 from 3, and for Rutgers, they go 8 of 17 from 3, so that kept them somewhat lively as Haran Zernu, he was able to go 13 points and 3 of 5 from 3-point range off the bench, but for Purdue, pretty clean, efficient performance here. They win the rebound battle 36-25. They play even up 9-9 with regards to turnovers, but Braden Smith, not a ton of scoring here with 16 points, but 8 assists. He was able to help to hold some good, clean offense, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, 19 points, 13 rebounds out of him, as Oscar Clough, only 3 rebounds on this day, but for Purdue, just a lot of guys are able to hit the boards, and they did a nice job on that as well. And then other teams that were in action of note, you had a very nice win from Grand Canyon, 67-45. We were wondering what was happening with this defense, and boy, oh boy, did it look good with Jaden Henley be able to supply 26 points, and this was a game that was 22-20 at the half. That's why I'm highlighting it, as for Stetson, they shoot 34% from the floor. They had 17 turnovers and 18 made field goals. That's not necessarily great, to say the least, and this was pretty rock solid. George Washington, a win but no cover, 84-70 against Army, one of the very rare unders that they've been able to play thus far this season. You've had Butler be a very rock solid team against the spread thus far, unable to cover against Eastern Michigan, but another nice win, 84-68. The final is, if you had Eastern Michigan go 8 of 14 from 3, and they've actually covered some numbers this year. Butler goes 11 of 20 from 3-point range, so that was a very nice expose there. As you had in this game, Finley Bizrak goes 6 of 10 from 3, 29 points, and for Butler, they do win that rebound battle by a count of 36-26. You had Cornell be able to put up some nice offensive numbers, but against George Mason, man, oh man, 99-81. George Mason is able to get the job done, and Cornell, a very rare back-to-back. They have to play against Towson on Wednesday. So, yeah, that's going to be a little bit rough on them. As for George Mason, they go 10 of 20 from 3-point range. Cornell, they continue to shoot 42% from 3. They go 13 of 31 from 3-point range, but blasted on glass. They lose that battle 34-26. And for George Mason, this team has been very good from 3-point range, with having Jawari Long, Malik Presley, and Corey Mincy all give between 16 and 17 points apiece, and 3 guys, Fat Hill, that's his actual name, Asai Troutman, and Emmanuel Konga, were all able to give you double figures as well. So nice high-scoring expose out there. And then you saw this game get harebrained and crazy for North Florida. Anyone that had them 72-63, SIU Edwardsville, they were able to pull away late, and they find a way to get the job done. As for North Florida, just 10 of 30 from 3-point range. They lose the turnover battle 12-9, so that was a little bit of an issue for them. This was a nice triumph, though, as you had Rhode Island be able to take down Brown by a count of 66-56. Brown is playing at one of the slower paces in all of college basketball, have not really gotten going on offense, 3 of 16 from 3-point range, but for Rhode Island, this defense has been getting better and better as the season goes along. Tyler Cochran, he was able to supply 17 points, 10 rebounds, so Rhode Island, after they had that initial loss at Tulsa, it looks like they're really finding their sea legs. A nice win and cover for Charlotte, 74-57 the final. That was a game that came onto the betting board very, very late, so anyone that was able to get in, good on you there. And good on Murray State for stepping up defensively, 84-52. They're able to take down Murray State. Murray State has really been cranking up their tempo, but good defense here as they were able to do a solid job going themselves 20 of 29 at the free throw line. For Morehead State, they only are able to shoot about 37% from the floor. One of your big butt kickings of the night, by the way. How about Lindenwood going on the road, and they just completely lambaste Northern Illinois, 99-64 the final. And then you saw a slog between Bradley and Washington State, 64-60. Bradley's able to get the job done, as Washington State, over the last few seasons, they've been a little bit sloppy with about 20 turnovers, so 21 made field goals. And for Bradley, they win this game despite Washington State going 8 of 16 from 3, and Bradley, they themselves just 7 of 30 from 3. But even though they lose a rebound battle, Bradley does 41-31. They did a nice job in terms of generating those turnovers that gave them those second and third chances to be able to find a way there. And Marquette, they managed to not lose, but this was not great against our good friends in Valparaiso. The Beacons were a beacon of hope. They lose in overtime, 75-72 the final for Marquette. This has just not been been a great team on the glass. They lose a rebound battle to Valparaiso, 40-38 for Marquette. They go just 6 of 21 from three. Did have Nigel James step up, give the team 21 points, but Valparaiso, good solid effort with Owen Dees coming off the bench. He had all D's of those 17 points. Loyola Chicago actually covered a spread, ladies and gentlemen, 83-72. I think that might have been their first cover of the year. Depends upon your closing number against North Texas, so yay verily there. And then Baylor and Sacramento State in what might have been the harebrained game of the night, 110-88. Baylor gets the job done against Sacramento State for the over. Sacramento State covers the number as Sacramento State just 10 of 32 from three, but all sorts of fouling in this one. Sacramento State 26 of 30 at the free throw line, 28 of 37 for Baylor. Baylor wins the rebound battle 40-30 as Dan Skillings and Michael Rata both had double-doubles in this game. So things got very harebrained there, and typically you'd expect better than 6 of 22 from three-point range from a team that scored 110 points, but that's what you had in Nevada. They do get it done, and they do manage to just barely cover that number against UC San Diego. This by kind of 76-70, the final end for UC San Diego. They went a little bit cold from three in this one. They only shot 26% from the outside, and for Nevada, a pair of guys off the bench, Peyton White, Von Weems, were both able to give you 11 points apiece, and for UC San Diego, just not during turnovers the way that they did last season. Now, actually won their turnover battle 8-4, but Nevada, they win that rebound battle 45-36. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been a little bit of an underwhelming season. Right now, the under is sitting at about 51.5%, 663 unders to 627 overs, and favorites on the spread are hitting at darn near 51%, 654, 632, and 19, with a few games still pending for Tuesday, since I do have to have this up by midnight Pacific. But that said, if you take a look at the last 7 days in college basketball, it has been all about unders, and it's been all about favorites. Favorites hitting at nearly 53.5%, 142, 123, and 7 against the spread, with the under hitting at a bit above 57%, 153 unders to 114 overs. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's what we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up about the ACC, SEC Challenge, Big Ten play, and so much more with Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Next, right here on Cousin Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson. Now, a part of the Beeson Family Podcast.
At Lowe's, before the holidays is the perfect time for upgrades and upkeep. During Black Friday, get up to 50% off select major appliances and buy more to save more with up to an additional 25% off when you bundle select major appliances. Plus, grab select DeWalt 20-volt max drill or impact driver kits for just $99. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 12/3. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Are you looking to get an inside edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSIN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cousin with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard. He is doing an absolutely tremendous job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he and Kobe Dan do a tremendous job with the show, The College Experience, as they take a look at some college football, they take a look at some college basketball, and so much more. And for those that love West Virginia athletics, he does a great job with the Ryan and Rush Show. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Moneyline_Max, spelled MAC. And Ryan, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, appreciate you having me. Conference play is starting up this week a little bit.
Yes, sir. And how do you take a look at these December conference games? Because I just feel like they've got a little bit of a different vibe and a little bit of a different tenor than they do in, say, just after Christmas, after the holidays, what have you. Because it's just very strange when you go from non-conference play to conference play, knowing that you're going to go back into non-conference play.
It is unique. I think that we get some overvalued teams this time of year. This week, I like to fade a lot of the overhype coming off the national tournaments that we saw last week, and especially coming off the island, whether it's the Bahamas, Maui, California, or Florida. So a lot of overreactions, I think, this week, where we think we figured out some teams, and we've seen teams that have success in these events sometimes really come back down to earth a little bit. Looking to kind of buy the dip on a couple of teams and then sell high on a couple others.
Absolutely. The old stock market buy the dip sort of thing. And I absolutely love that. Like I was seeing on Tuesday, we're not going to know how that turns out, but like getting north of 16 points at the rack with Rutgers, that just felt a little bit outrageous in my opinion. And just when it comes to what we're going to be getting right now as well, how much do you have to just adjust home court these next few weeks as well? Because I think here in early December, home court is going to be at a fever pitch for like these ACC, SEC games, obviously the Big Ten games. But as we know, in like that last week of December, that's where things become a little bit of a ghost town. And I think that that is very much a moving target in the month of December, where you might be handicapping home court advantage very differently right now than you will be 2 or 3 weeks from now.
All the way till about the second week in January when the students come back for the spring semester. I completely agree. I think this is definitely a week that you want to hammer some of these home courts because you're also seeing a lot of these teams hit the road for the first time in a true new road atmosphere. And we saw early on what these teams that hit the road the first 2 weeks of the season really struggle in these high profile games. The night that comes to mind is when Kentucky hit the road at Louisville, Texas Tech hit the road at Illinois, Creighton hit the road at Gonzaga, and all three were handled. So I think you continue to hammer some of these home teams in these spots. But like you said, once we get past mid-December, I think that's when you want to look at some of these bye teams because they are sleepy spots. There's more distractions. A lot easier to let your guard down when you don't have that extra jolt from the student section that doesn't really exist this time of year. So yeah, I agree with you there, Greg.
Absolutely, and it's going to be really interesting to see what we get moving forward out of some of these teams. As Ryan McIntyre, he does such a great job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He is joining me on Coast to Coast Soups, and certainly we're going to be seeing some conference games that are going to be going down on Wednesday. The Wisconsin versus Northwestern game, I think, is going to be a lot of fun. We've got the ACC versus SEC challenge as well. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I know you were talking about a little bit of like a buy the dip spot, what have you. How much would you be looking at that at, say, a UCLA versus Washington game? Because UCLA came in with a lot of fanfare. They lose that game to California. I honestly don't think it's that bad, but as of right now, we don't have any numbers up for this UCLA versus Washington game. I would think UCLA would be like a modest-sized favorite. That, I think, could be one of those interesting games where do you want to buy in on UCLA or do you want to take a Washington team who's going to be at home, but right now is dealing with a little bit of injury, most notably to their gentleman that comes in from Germany who has been so good on Heinz Steinbach.
Interesting dilemma here, too, because you got UCLA coming off that Cal loss over a week to prepare. Mick Cronin traditionally pretty good off the losses. I want to see what the opening number is, but I think if you're getting UCLA as a short home favorite, that kind of would be a spot to buy them here because Washington's still battling the injury bug. We saw them really miss them at Colorado.
Absolutely, and that's really going to be one of the main games in the Big Ten, and then we've obviously got Wisconsin versus Northwestern, and just what do we make out of those two teams? Because both teams, they did take a little bit of a loss over Feast Week, so they're sort of in the same sort of boat there with Wisconsin. They look good in their first game, and then they lose to a TCU team that might be the most random team all season long. You lose at home to New Orleans to begin the season, then you knock off Wisconsin and Florida in a neutral court in the state of California, so there's that aspect of things. And then for Northwestern, as we know, really efficient team that really doesn't beat themselves, but they don't necessarily have a ton of pizzazz outside of Nick Martinelli as well.
I agree with you, but I do like backing usually Chris Collins as an underdog. Traditionally, he's been really good to me in these spots. They play kind of a slower tempo too. They're more direct. So Wisconsin has been really good in the non-con over the last couple of years. And then for whatever reason, your Badgers feel like they struggle early in conference play. Like last year, I think they started 0-2. So that might be a spot where I'm going to look to take the points just because I know what I'm getting with Chris Collins in Northwestern. They have played a road game. They played at DePaul. So I think that getting that one out of the way, I think this could be a 1 or 2 possession game with a team that's that knows their identity in Northwestern.
Yep, and I do think that with this Northwestern team, just always having to go to the great state of Illinois, very difficult for the Wisconsin Badgers as well. Lots of teams have been tripped up over the last few years over there by Northwestern, and then we've got ourselves some really good ACC, SEC challenge games, and we're doing this prior to knowing the results of the Tuesday games. But how do you take a look at this year's challenge? Because last year, well, it wasn't much of a challenge because the SEC just ran roughshod. The ACC won two more games than the two of us, and we are not partaking in the SEC challenge, so that's not great to say the least. But feels like it should be much more competitive this year with an SEC that I think is deep, but doesn't necessarily have the, shall we say, top end star power, as many like Sweet 16, Elite Eight teams as a season going. For the ACC, even though you've had like one or two teams like Boston College, sorry, I have to call them out, Boston College, just not having a great year, it feels like that bottom is much better than it was a season ago.
It definitely is. I think it goes back to the coaches that they hired. So bringing over a guy like Ryan Odom at Virginia, they've already elevated that roster. Obviously, Will Wade, I know they took a couple losses out there in Maui, but I expect them to bounce back. Ken Palm projecting this out, that does have the SEC winning, I think, 12-4 or 11-5. So it definitely is, the SEC is the better conference, top to bottom, but I think that the margin is a lot smaller. I think you look at it, you got a bunch of 1 to 2 possession games projected, and I agree with that. So maybe if the ACC can get on the right side of a couple of these games, let's say a Missouri at Notre Dame, can they flip that one, or a Miami Ole Miss, or Georgia Florida State, and Texas A&M Pitt, and there was another one, South Carolina, Virginia Tech is another projected 1-score game. Can they flip that, unlike they were able to do a year ago, and get on the right side and maybe make this? They don't have to win it, but I think they just have to be respectable so that the narrative the rest of the season isn't that the ACC is god awful once again.
Yep, and I do think that for the ACC, there is going to be a little bit of a come up, and I think Wednesday might have the most entertaining game in the ACC SEC Challenge. It might not necessarily be the most high-profile game, but I believe Vanderbilt should be higher ranked than they are right now. This has been a very, very good team. And SMU, they are turning down for absolutely nobody whatsoever. How do you take a look at a game like this where, I made the joke on the podcast with Tristan Freeman yesterday. He was saying first to 90 wins. I said it might be first to 100 wins, as these two teams are going to absolutely gun it, and I think that is going to be a lot of good, clean family fun right there.
It really is, and you get two teams in the top 50 in tempo, so expect a track meet, Andy Enfield, Mark Byington. Both teams like to open it up. Both teams want to play fast. Both teams want to score 90 plus, and you may see a NBA-like game 105 to 100. So I'm excited to watch that one. I probably am going to take the points at SMU. Like I said, you're getting Vandy at the absolute top of the market. I do agree that they're underranked in the polls because of their name and brand, most likely. But, if they're laying double digits here, I think this SMU team is chippy enough to stay within that number.
Yep, and this SMU team, it does feel like they're much better than they were a season ago as well. I still remember SMU just beat up on a whole bunch of bad teams, and then right when they were playing against the good teams, that's where they cratered a little bit. So we'll see if things are able to be a little bit better there. And then this one should be amazing as well. Alabama versus Clemson, as Alabama, no real cupcakes on their schedule other than that opening game against North Dakota, a team that is not going to shy away from a challenge whatsoever. And Clemson already has a win over an SEC team, Georgia, in overtime on a neutral court out there in the great state of South Carolina. How do you take a look at this matchup? Because as we know, big time tempo war, Clemson looking to play super slow, Alabama looking to play super fast, and no love lost between these two because they met in the NCAA tournament a few years ago and in a non-conference game, I believe, 2 years ago as well.
Yeah, they did. And Clemson was able to really handle Alabama in that non-con game to get to 6-0. And then you mentioned it, Elite Eight, where Alabama was able to get their revenge here. I think it's a tough spot for this. This is a younger Clemson team compared to what they've been in the past. First true road spot. I think Alabama definitely so battle-tested with the schedule. You got to give Nate Oates credit, man. He does not run from anybody.
Yes, absolutely. I love the fact that Alabama always challenges themselves. They are never going to back down from a fight. They and Michigan State are always two teams that always have a lot of affinity for with that regard, as we do have Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then that other marquee game that I really take a look at for Wednesday is NC State versus Auburn, because for Auburn, we've seen the best of times and we've seen the worst of times for them. They hold in there against Houston. They had themselves a nice win against St. John's, but they got completely blown out by Michigan, and they've already gone to overtime against Bethune-Cookman. And for NC State, was a little bit underwhelmed by what we saw to them at Maui. How do you take a look at this matchup? One that I think could really be one of the, shall we say, swing games of this ACC SEC challenge.
Yeah, both teams coming off tough losses. Although Auburn did bounce back and go 2-1, NC State was a very disappointing trip out there. I think that this is going to be a fascinating game. You got a young coach versus an experienced coach, and both teams want to get up and down. So I think you see a lot of tempo here in a high-flying game once again. Really looking forward to that. That could be a swing game for the ACC. Can NC State get in the foxhole and pull out a big road win?
Yeah, that would be absolutely massive for them. And then we've talked a lot of Big Ten Conference play. We've talked a lot of ACC, SEC play. Is there a team or two, though, that just over this first about month or so of the season, as we're now checking in a little bit past 4 weeks from the start of the season, that you've just really been impressed with, and you've had to make some adjustments with the way that you're handicapping them because of what you've seen thus far?
I think you got to go to TCU, Greg. You throw out that first bye game against New Orleans.
And the shooting in that game was ridiculous, by the way.
Absolutely. Going 3 for 27. And New Orleans just punched up multiple times. They almost won a bye game at Mississippi State. They were chippy in another bye game.
I
think that TCU just quietly is really solid once again under Jamie Dixon. People forget they had Michigan beat. I mean, they led Michigan for 33 minutes out of that game, who's the number one team in the country now, and KenPom in the net rankings. And then to go and handle Florida and Wisconsin back-to-back days, I think Jamie Dixon quietly has a team that represents his identity again, defensive, really rebound the ball well, and I think the Frogs are an NCAA tournament team again.
Yep, with TCU, I was very bullish on them to start the season. That first loss, man, that was not great to say the least, but it appears as though they are back, and a man that never takes a loss like that, he's just always back. He's just always in full force. That'd be you, Ryan. You and Kobe do such an excellent job over there at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Love to give people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, go check us out at the College Experience. Twitter, I'm at Moneyline_Mac. Always appreciate it, and look forward to being back on to talk college hoops anytime, man.
Absolutely. Ryan does such an excellent job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and every single time he joins me, he learns such great insights. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Wednesday as we hit some big shots.
At Lowe's, before the holidays is the perfect time for upgrades and upkeep. During Black Friday, get up to 50% off select major appliances and buy more to save more with up to an additional 25% off when you bundle select major appliances. Plus, grab select DeWalt 20-volt max drill or impact driver kits for just $99. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 12/3. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Take a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. We're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving two bigger conference teams first, and then any game involving just one team from these conferences will be listed at the bottom. That'd be the Atlantic Sun, the America East, the Patriot League, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Big South, along with the Southland. If I haven't said Northeast Conference as well. So how about if we start things off with 677, 678 on the card. Youngstown St is playing us to Wright St. Wright St hopes to be the right side as a 2.5-point underdog. Totals between 145.5 to a 147.5. Set a total of a 147. Right now, mainly seeing 145.5. So I'm going to be in on the over. You have a Wright State team that has been really looking to slow themselves down a little bit ever since they had the coaching change 2 off seasons ago. Scott Nagy always had this as a very rambunctious offense and a team that wouldn't really play a lot of defense, and we have been noticing that this squad has been able to do a little bit of a reversal with that regard, and for this Wright State team, they've been a little bit better with regards to the defensive side of things, and got a Youngstown St team that last year was in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, right now a mid-tempo team, but they've taken a little bit of step back with regards to that defense. Wright State right now, they're a mid-tempo team as well, about 188th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but with Wright State, you've been able to get some relatively good production out of Michael Cooper, who has come in as a freshman, 14.5 points, 3 assists per game. Wright State, okay at being able to take care of the ball. They have a lot of work to do in terms of their free throw shooting percentage at 64.5%, and that's part of the reason why I'm going to be in on Youngstown State. And initially, Wright State is only allowing teams to shoot 27.2% from 3. I do think that there's going to be negative regression with that. Michael Imarabaje has been able to give you 10.5 points, 7 boards. He's been pretty rock solid down low, and it is a Wright State team that has been a top 150 team in terms of rebound percentage. Youngstown State not quite the same down low with Gabe Dines being out from a season ago, but you've got Chris Carroll caroling all the way to 14 points, 4.5 boards per contest, and currently shooting 45.5% from 3. This Youngstown State team as a whole, they're attempting more 3s and 2s, and again, I do think that there's a bit of regression coming for that Wright State three-point shooting defense, and they're shooting 36% from the outside. They've done a pretty solid job in terms of generating turnovers, top on our team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Bryson Dawkins has come over from UC Christian. He and Rich Rolfe are both give you between 10 and 10.5 points per game, and even though Youngstown State doesn't have a single guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, they've been able to do an okay job rebounding by committee and getting back Vladimir Saldarizde, who comes over from UT Martin as he missed a few games this season. He's been able to get the team 8.5 points, shoots the high 30s from 3 at 6'7". Should be a little bit of an X factor for this offense. So set my line 5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Youngstown State and set a total of 147. So at the 145.5, I like the over. 679, 680 on the card. You've got Arkansas. They play also Louisville, and Louisville finds themselves as a road favorite at 3.5 to 4 points. So on this game, it is 164.5, and I said Louisville as a 3-point favorite. So here at 3.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Arkansas. Everyone's talking about the Louisville offense, and rightfully so. They've been a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. The defense has also been very rock solid, though. They've been a top 20 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as they're a top 85 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've actually been a top 20 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage defense as well. But I think that Arkansas can step up and have Trayvon Brazil do a solid job getting the team 5+ boards. He's got nice versatility to match up with this Louisville team. Sandra Frew has really been able to step up for Louisville, by the way. Under the radar, he's been able to give the team 10 points, 6 boards, a block. He's been able to give them that rough and tumble down low. Obviously, your main headliners are the likes of Ryan Conwell, who's been leading the way with 20 points, shooting 50% from 3. Mikael Brown Jr. as a freshman, 17 points. Not shooting great from 3, but Isaac McNeely, he's been able to shoot 43% from 3. And Brown, 6 assists to fewer than 3 turnovers per game, but I do feel like the Arkansas backcourt is going to be able to hold up. You've got 2 really good freshmen of their own, as they've been able to get right around about 16+ points per contest out of both Darius Acuff along with Malik Brown. And Brown has mainly been doing it off the bench. They've got a combined 8.3 assists to fewer than 3 turnovers per game between the two of them. Billy the Kid Richmond has been able to do a nice job, give you about 8-9 points per game. And Arkansas has been shooting at like some unrealistic clip from 3 right now. They're shooting about 35.5% from 3. They've been a top 40 offense in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Got a little bit held down by Michigan State, but past that, this team has been able to do a nice job humming there. They're only turning the ball over 9.5 times per game, and with this Arkansas squad, they're not really grabbing a lot of second and third chances. They've been outside the top 175 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they're doing a nice job guarding the perimeter as well. This is a true road environment over there at Bud Walton Arena, and I do think that DJ Wagner, if he could step up, and he's been all over the place this year with about 8.5 points, 4 assists per game, that this Arkansas team could hold in there. I think that this is going to be close enough for late game felling. You've got 2 teams that certainly are not going to be shy to run. Both of these teams do rank in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game, with Arkansas about 85th in the country, and Louisville, contrary to popular belief, they're not necessarily like completely and utterly gunning it, but still playing at a relatively brisk pace. So circumstance where I did set my total here at 165, I'm going to be willing to take anything north of 3 here with Arkansas, and I'm going to be willing to take that 164.5 over as well. 681, 682 on the card. It is UMass playing us to Harvard. Harvard is a underdog of 4.5 to 5 points. 146 and 146.5 is the total. And with Harvard, I set them as a 5.5 point underdog. So here at the 4.5, 5, I'm going to be willing to lay with UMass, mainly because I do think that UMass is going to be able to do a nice job in terms of winning this battle down low. It's a Massachusetts team that still has some suspect 3-point shooting to say the least, but it's a little bit better this year. They bring in Marcus Banks, who's a really nice 3-point shooter over at UMBC, right now shooting 35.5% from 3, 15.5 points per game for a UMass squad that they've got to stop turning the ball over. They've been outside the top 275 in terms of their ball security, but I mean, just like last year, they're plowing on the glass, top 75 team in terms of overall rebound percentage, and in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they're allowing fewer than 7 offensive rebounds per game for their opponents. They've been a top 30 team with that regard. Leonardo Batol, who comes over from Abilene Christian, has been a rock-solid scorer for this team as well, giving them 16.5 points, 9 boards, not generating the same amount of steals that he did in the old system, but he's been pretty solid there. And for this Harvard team, they have had a tough time being able to give themselves second and third chances. They're outside the top 340 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They don't necessarily turn the ball over a ton, but they themselves don't generate a ton of turnovers as well. Harvard is very much based around good perimeter shooting, as right now Thomas Beatties is shooting 66% from 3, and should be going down, but he, Robert Hinton, Chandler Piggy, pretty much 3 of your top 4 scorers from a season ago, they're all back, and they've been able to combine for a little bit over 41 points per game. Hinton has been hitting it hard with giving you about a steal and a half per contest as well. Piggy has done a nice job in terms of giving you about 4 boards per game, but other than Tay Barber, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, nobody else on the roster over 5 rebounds per game. And with this Harvard team, they have been aligned quite a bit outside the top 200 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, and for a UMass team that has had some, shall we say, question marks with regards to being able to put the ball in the basket from the outside, that's going to be able to help them out quite a bit. You've got a unit in UMass that has been quite a bit up-tempo here in the last few seasons, while Harvard has been very much more low and slow. Harvard is right now 361st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UMass more around 71st, so good old situation of something's got to give. I did set a total here of a 147.5, so I'm going to be in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with UMass. 683, 684 on the card. Georgia Southern is going to be playing us at Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech is anywhere between a pick'em to a 1-point dog. 143.5 is the total. Did set Georgia Southern as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. You've got dueling tempos here, as Louisiana Tech, they're looking to play super slow. They're outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. You've got Georgia Southern team that is absolutely looking to gun it, 34th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Georgia Southern, they've been much cleaner with their offense than they were a season ago. Last year, they were outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, getting Tyron Moore back after he spent last year at UAB. 2 years ago, he was a team's top scorer, has been big, as he and Spud Webb have combined for a little bit over 5 assists, 26 points per contest, and Moore is giving you more from the outside, shooting about 43% from 3-point range. This team has been able to have Alden Applewhite do a nice job down low, give this team about 6 boards, 13 points per game. It is a Georgia Southern team that's still getting plowed on the glass, or outside the top 35 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but they have been able to generate turnovers, top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And you do have a Louisiana Tech team that is typically very strong down low, but right now that backcourt play is just leaving something to be desired. You lose a 7+ assists per game guy in Sean Newman from a season ago, so they've looked at AJ Bates to be a little bit of a do-it-all guy. 12 points, 4.5 assists, right now shooting 45% from 3 for a team that shoots 26.1% from 3. That should be going northward, but I mean, among players that made at least 1 3 this year, you've got 2 guys on the roster shooting above 25% from 3. Gaten Cooper, Scooter Williams in the backcourt. They're combined for 20 points per game, and Cooper has been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game, but again, you're going to need to get a little bit more 3-point shooting out of this team. Louisiana Tech is certainly going to be able to dominate the glass. They're right now top 40 team in their offensive rebound percentage. Are grabbing nearly 15 offensive rebounds per game. They've been able to do a nice job on the inside as well, but that said, for this team, they're also turning the ball over about 12 times per game. They've been quite sloppy with that regard. Georgia Southern is very much looking to run and gun it. Louisiana Tech, they're looking to play low and slow, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I do think that this is going to be close enough for late game felling, so I did set a total of 144.5. I'm going to be in on the over, and I do think that Georgia Southern just is able to find a way with their backcourt to be able to win this game. Set my line at 4.5, so wanted to lay the small number with Georgia Southern / shake them as pick 'em, and I'm in on the over. 685, 686 on the card. Sacred Heart is going to be on the road against Mount St. Mary's, and the Mount finds themselves anywhere between a pick 'em to a 1.5 point underdog. Tonight's game, it is 152.5, and with Sacred Heart, I did set them as a 3-point favorite. So as a pick 'em / a very, very small favorite, I'm going to be willing to buy in on them. Mount St. Mary's outside the top 320 in terms of ball security. They're turning the ball over 15 times per game. That's just rough, and when Mount St. Mary's has really been humming, it's been been because their rebounding has been very good, and now they're outside the top 330 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're shooting 63% the free throw line. That's a bottom 40 mark in all of college basketball. Our Lindis Keys, he's out with a little bit of injury, should be good to go in this one. He's been the top scorer with 13 points, shooting about 41% from three. And for Luke McElden, he's been solid down low, 6.5 boards, about 12.5 points per game. The team on the defensive glass has not been good, but they're just not giving themselves second and third chances. Xavier Lipscomb has had to be a do-it-all point guard, 9.5 points, 5.5 boards, right around about 4.5 assists per game. So he's been able to do a solid job there, but his team just really lacking a ton down low. And with this Mount St. Mary's team, what is very troubling with them is that they just have not been able to generate any turnovers. They're actually a bottom 3 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They are turning the ball over about 8 times more than their opponents, and for Sacred Heart, turnovers have been an issue. Outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, but this team bombs it from 3. They're shooting about 36.5% from 3. Anquan Hill at 6'9", he's only shooting about 30% from 3 after he shot about 40% a season ago, but 17 points, 6 boards, a steal per game. Deshaun Gittins, he's getting it. He's been able to give you 15 points, 2.5 steals. He's shooting 42% from 3. Niall Ralph Byer, one of the main returners from a season ago, shooting 48% from 3. And Jan Farrell has been just all around the boulevard, St. Bonaventure, East Carolina, 6'6", 6'7", do-it-all guy that's giving 9 points, 4 boards. He's been able to shoot over 40% from 3 as well. I do think that for Sacred Heart, they're going to have their issues inside. They're outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and teams are shooting over 40% from 3 against them. It's a bad perimeter defense, but we should be seeing a little bit of positivity there. For Mount St. Mary's, they're outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Sacred Heart, they're within the top 125, so a little bit of a tempo war here. I did set my total at a 149. I just flat out don't think you get enough clean possessions from Mount St. Mary's for the over, so like the under, and at a pick'em slash at a small favorite price, I'm going to be willing to lay with Sacred Heart. 687, 688 on the card. It is Towson, and they play us Cornell. Cornell finds themselves as an underdog. I've been seeing anywhere between 4 to 6 points, so this is ranging quite a bit, and the total is 152, and with Towson, I made them a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and man, this is quite the tempo war right here, as you've got a Cornell team that is currently 13th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Towson 363rd. And for Towson, they're based around defense. They're right now number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home. Cornell is right now taking 53.6% of their field goal attempts from 3, 6th highest percentage in the country, while shooting 41.7% from 3 to make them one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. I think that this Towson defense holds up, though. They're allowing teams to only shoot 30% from 3. You just know that this system is going to be able to come through time and time again, and I think that they slow this game down. I'm going to be in on the under, and you do have a nice backcourt with this Towson bunch. Dylan Williamson, Tyler Teata, these 2 guys have been able to combine for about 34.5 points per game, and even though you might not have one guy that's giving you like 10 plus rebounds or anything like that, this team does such a great job rebounding by committee. Teata has been able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Jack Dombia, who comes over from Wright St, 13 points, 6 boards, and then you've been able to get some relatively good production down low out of Chike Ndefu, who's been able to give you 4.5 rebounds. He's a nice rim protector for this team. As for Towson, I do think that they're going to be able to make this game a little bit grimier against a Cornell team that, even though they're having all their success with their 3-point shooting, they haven't turned the ball over about 15 times per game. Part of that is just the overall tempo itself, but I do think that there's going to be regression coming for a team that's right now shooting 42% from 3 as a collective. Adam Sang-Hinton, he's hitting it hard with 13.5 points. He's been able to shoot about 41% from 3. Cooper Norad is shooting over 44% from the outside, 21 points per contest, and this team has been a little bit more top-heavy than in the past. With Cornell, typically it's a whole square than some of its parts approach, but you've only got one other guy give you over 7.7 points per game, and that'd be Jake Feigen, who's been dealing with an injury. You've had the likes of DJ Nix, Casper Sepp do a better job down low, though. Sepp has been able to give you 6 rebounds per game, so unlike the past years, Cornell is doing a better job of being able to hold up on the glass, but they too have been outside the top 2 at 35 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's a good old situation of something's got to give, but I do think that Cornell gets slowed down here, and I think that we see some regression with that 3-point shooting, so I'm going to be willing to lay it with Towson, set them as a 7.5 point favorite, maybe by a total of 149.5. Also an on the under, 689, 690 on the card. IU Indy is on the road against Detroit, and Detroit is a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite. Total on this game, it is 179, and I set my total at a 179.5. 179 or less, I'm going to be in on the over. IU Indy is obviously playing at one of the most ridiculous paces and one of the most ridiculous styles that has ever been seen in basketball. They're pressing all 94 feet, and it's really not working out well for them. They've knocked off 2 Division I teams thus far, and they certainly like to hoist it up from 3, but they shoot 33% from 3. Neither here nor there. It's a lot of Division II guys that have come up to the D1 ranks after over at West Liberty. We saw a lot of success for Coach Ben Howlett with the system, but now it's a little bit of a different ball of wax. You've got Matt Compass and Kyler D'Agostino be able to combine for about 31 points per game, and D'Agostino has been able to shoot 42% from 3-point range. This team is just getting absolutely dump trucked down the glass. They're well outside the top 280 in terms of their rebound percentage, and they're allowing teams to shoot 36% from 3. That's a downfall of the system. If you don't get that turnover, it makes it very easy for teams to be able to pop it and lock it from 3, and Detroit is doing an okay job of taking care of the ball. 12 turnovers per game, not going to call it amazing, not going to call it bad, and we should see some positivity with the fact that they are shooting 24.5% from 3. This is not at any point going to be an amazing 3-point shooting team, but you've got one guy on the roster that's made a 3 that's shooting above 29.5% from 3. TJ Nito, who's been able to give you 12 points, 3.5 boards. Orlando Lovejoy is that do-it-all player that's back from a season ago, and he's been rock solid, 12.5 points, 3.5 assists, stealing half per contest, and then you've got Aiden Carter, who's been able to give you 11 points per game. I do think that this team certainly should be able to win the battle down low, as Detroit has been really good with their offensive rebounding. Top 85 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they themselves not doing a great job guarding the perimeter. They're allowing teams to shoot over 35.5% from 3. They had some issues in terms of guarding the 3-point line last season, so even though it's not a Detroit team that's necessarily looking to gun it, they're not necessarily the slowest team in the world either, though. This is a Detroit team that, in terms of total possessions per game, right now they're checking in about 126. That you do get just enough for the over. Some might total 179.5, so like the over, and with Detroit, made them a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number. 691, 692 on the board. It is Oakland, and they play us to Fort Wayne, and Fort Wayne does find themselves as a 7 to an 8 point underdog. 162 is the total, and set a total of a 156.5. I like the under. You've got a Fort Wayne team that's certainly looking to gun it, and Oakland is not the same team that they were a season ago when they were outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. They're more on about 100th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so neither here nor there. And then it's a Fort Wayne team that last year they were playing quite a bit up-tempo. We've seen them slow down a little bit more this year, as they're currently 147th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but for Fort Wayne, also not quite the same team as they were a season ago in terms of winning the turnover battle. Still doing a very solid job, as they themselves are a top 125 team in terms of protecting the ball, and they've still been a top 75 team in terms of generating turnovers as well, but this is also a squad that doesn't quite have the same scores as they did a season ago. Corey Adnott has had to lead the way with about 18 points, 3 assists. He's shooting 38% from 3. DeAndre 3000 Craig has been able to come in from Denver, about 2.5 assists, 15 points per game, as it's been a lot of by committee sort of facilitation, as Craig Hadnot and then Mikhail Stevenson, their number 3 scorer, with 14.5 points per game. I'll give you between 2.7 and 3 assists per contest, but I do think that they're going to have a tough time down low against an Oakland team that they bring back one of their main big men, and Bari Navalura. He's done a nice job being able to supply this team with about 5.5 boards, 14 points per game. And then Brody Robinson, the transfer from UT Arlington. He has been incredible in terms of doling out the ball, 5.5 assists, so 1.3 turnovers per game. Last year, you had an Oakland team that was one of the most rough teams with their 3-point shooting in all of college basketball, and that's been able to pick up. Robinson has given you 15 points, shooting 37% from 3. Nassim Mashur, he's been able to come in, shoot 35% from 3. And Michael Hoagie has just come back in the fold as well. He was a really nice transfer, started his career over at St. Peter's. He has come in after he had a nice year over at Jacksonville State, give the team 17.5 points per game in his first 3 games, and with Isaac Garrett, who's able to pop it from 3 at 6'8", but that's not necessarily his forte. Give you 16 points, right around 6 rebounds per game. I do think that Oakland is going to be able to do a pretty solid job inside. Oakland has been a top 85 team in terms of ball security as well. They've been giving it up from 3. They're allowing teams to shoot 37% from the outside, but I do think that there's going to be a little bit of positivity with that regard. Now, we know that in the Ryan League, typically defense is not necessarily at a premium, but I do think that Oakland holds up here. I did set them as a favorite of 6.5 points. I do think that Fort Wayne going to do just enough with that backcourt and the way that they generate turnovers hold in there, so do like the under and the points with Fort Wayne. 693, 694 on the card. Alabama is going to be playing against Clemson. Clemson is an underdog of 9.5 to 10.5 points. 164.5 to 166.5 is the total. Said Alabama's an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Clemson, the last few times that these two teams have played, go back to the Elite 8 game a few years ago. There was a upset where Clemson went on the road and knocked off Alabama. They just seem to do a nice job in terms of slowing down this Alabama team. And for Clemson, it's very much whole greater than the sum of its parts. You've got 3 different guys that give you between 11 and 11.6 points per game. Carter Welling, RJ Godfrey, and Justin Porter. And even though this is a backcourt that's in a lot of transition, they've lost a lot of their guards from a season ago. They're a top 20 team in terms of protecting the ball, and right now you've got 8 different guys that are giving you at least 7.3 points per game. So they've got up and down the boulevard. A lot of guys are able to just contribute, do a nice job for this team. They don't even have a guy that gives you over 3 assists per game. Zach Foster right now leading the way with about 2.9 assists per contest, and his team has been very sound on the glass, top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they do a really good job of guarding it from 3. Now, they have faced against a lot of teams that have been lesser three-point shooting teams, but they're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from 3, and you've got an Alabama team that, as we know, they absolutely love to bomb it from 3. They're right now attempting as many 3-point shots as 2-point shots, and they have been a top 30 team once again in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Aiden Holloway, LeBaron Filan, these 2 guys are combining for about 39 points per game and are both shooting above 38% from 3. Aiden Sherrill has been a nice find, 44% 3-point shooter, 10 points per game. Have a little bit of question with this team down low, but ever since Kenton Bristow, the transfer from Tarleton, has gotten out there on the floor, he's been able to give the team 7.3 rebounds per game, so he's giving them a little bit more there. It's not an Alabama team that's going to be hauling in there a lot of offensive rebounds or anything like that, but after they were getting plastered on glass to begin the season, that has been able to help them out a little bit. Alabama, not a team that's going to force any turnovers. They're well outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this is one of those old classic tempo wars, as you've got a Clemson team that, in terms of total possessions per game, and this includes an overtime game that they played against an up-tempo Georgia team, they're 268th in terms of total possessions per game. Alabama is 16th. I do think that Clemson is going to be able to score with Alabama. We've seen them do it in the past. I think this game is close enough for late game felling. I said a total of 166.5, so you're at the 164.5, 165. I'm in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Clemson. 695, 696 on the card. Northern Kentucky plays us to Cleveland State. Cleveland State is a 10.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 157.5 to 158, and I did set Cleveland State as an underdog of 7 points, so I'm going to be willing to take those points. I just still have all sorts of question marks with Northern Kentucky, and I haven't loved what I've seen out of Cleveland State. They bring in Rob Summers. He was an assistant last season over at Missouri, and he's come in, and the team has really not played a lot of defense. Right now, they are turning the ball over left and right as well, outside the top 320 in terms of ball security, and right now teams are very much going bombs away from them. They're allowing teams to shoot over 33% from 3, and outside the top 320 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but I do like what I've seen out of Dasan Nasaya along with Trey Beard. They've been able to combine for about 31 points per game, and Beard is right now shooting 49% from 3. It's Cleveland State as a whole. They're shooting 36% from the outside. They are getting absolutely bludgeoned on the glass. They're outside the top 320 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're allowing teams to grab darn near 14 offensive rebounds per game, but this is a Northern Kentucky backcourt that, without Sam Vincent, who has been there for an eon, they just have not been the same themselves. This is typically a team that is very good in terms of just being able to hold things down with regards to the turnovers, and they've been turning the ball over about 13 times per game, and that's an issue. You've got Dan Gressinger, who's really taking a nice stride forward. He was good in conference play last year, shooting 38.5% for 3, 18 points per game. And Donovan Ode, who comes over from Cal State Fullerton, he's been really versatile. Over 2 steals, 18 points, and this is a team that's still in the top 75 in terms of generating steals. They've just been turning the ball over a little bit too much themselves, but Ode has been able to shoot 40% from 3. Khalil Robinson has been able to shoot 49% from the outside, but also have a team that they themselves have been outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They do return one of their top rebounders in LJ Wells from a season ago. 8 boards, 11.5 points per game. He's a lone guy in the roster, though, that's really giving you above 4.1 rebounds per game. You could use someone like Tay Dozier to be able to step up a little bit more. For Cleveland State, certainly this has not been a team that's been very imposing down low, but having Josiah Harris, I think, is very big. He's been able to give the team about 10 points, 8 rebounds per game. Now, he has been missing the last 2 games. Very questionable for this one. I had to handicap him out, so that was a little bit of a blow, but Nasaya has been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. You're probably going to be looking to, if you do indeed have Harris out of the fold, and I have factored him out, a little bit more out of someone like a David Giddens, who's been in and out of the lineup himself, but he's a 6'7", a little bit of a wing that's been able to give you about 6 points per contest. He's able to pop it a little bit from 3-point range as well, and I do think the Cleveland State finds a way to be able to hold in there. It's a Northern Kentucky team that typically is a little bit of a slower tempo team. They're playing a little bit faster than normal. Currently, in terms of total possessions per game, about 223rd. Cleveland State, they certainly have been cranking up their tempo a little bit more from past years as well. Cleveland State right now is about 45th in terms of total possessions per game, so did set a line of 7. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Cleveland State, and did set a total here of a 151. I think that you get a lot of sloppy turnovers on both sides, so in on the under and the points with Cleveland State. 697, 698 on the card. Western Michigan is playing out to Southern Indiana. Southern Indiana, a 5 to 5.5 point underdog. 150 to 153 is the total, so got a wide range on the total, and I set my total at 146. I'm going to be in on the under. Southern Indiana is right now outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Western Michigan is well outside the top 250 themselves. It's a Western Michigan team that has been looking to push a little bit of tempo. They're 88th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Southern Indiana, they're 23rd, but just a lot of dead possessions on both sides for the Southern Indiana team. Right now, they're turning the ball over about 13 times per game, and they are shooting a paltry 30% for 3 while being outside the top 275 in terms of both free throw shooting percentage and 2-point shooting percentage. You've had Ismail Habib, who was very good over at Portland State 2 seasons ago as their main facilitator, do a nice job with 19 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, and then you've got Tolu Samuels down low, not giving you a lot of scoring, but he's supplying 9 rebounds per game. Southern Indiana is starting to find something with regards to their offensive rebounding, a top 150 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, well outside the top 300 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, and that is where Western Michigan is going to have an advantage, as Western Michigan last year was actually dead last in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage at home. They're a little bit better this year, but they're still shooting 31% from the outside, but do have a Western Michigan team that's in the top 175 in terms of rebound percentage. You've got Jaden Brewer, who comes over from Florida National, does everything except for shoot threes. 13 points, 7 boards, a steal per contest, and the Max Burton, about 8.6 rebounds per game. I like what he's able to bring to the table. You've got Trey Lewis, who's been able to do a nice job in terms of a little bit of versatility with about 6.5 points. He's able to pop it from 3 as well, but Brady Schwartz is like the lone guy popping threes right now, shooting about 58% from 3, 9 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. It is a Western Michigan team that has been daring teams essentially shoot it from 3. They've got one of the highest 3-point shooting rates on defense in all of college basketball, and they've been allowing teams to shoot over 33.5% from the outside end. For Western Michigan, just all sorts of sloppiness with the ball. They have been turning the ball over 15 times per game themselves, and that's why I set a lower total here. You've got a pair of teams that are not shooting it well from 3. You've got a pair of teams that are really turning it over. I recognize that they're up tempo, but I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under end. I do think that Western Michigan going to do a nice job on the glass, but the improvement that we've been seeing out of Samuel down low has me in on Southern Indiana. So my line of 4, so take those points with Southern Indiana and the under 699, 700 on the card. It is Minnesota, and they play us at Indiana State with the small strings in the Union. Minnesota is a 10 to a 10.5 point underdog. Total on this game, it is 141.5. I did set Indiana as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Minnesota. With Minnesota, I recognize that the 3-point shooting is very much less than savory right now, but with this Indiana team, I do have a few question marks still with them, as well as for Indiana, they've been able to do a really good job with their backcourt. Tucker DeVries has been incredible coming off of injury, as he's done a tremendous job being able to supply this team with over 15 points per game. He's been able to haul in there right around about 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's just as versatile as we all remember. And then Lamar Wilkerson, 17 points per game. He's been able to shoot over 41% from threes. Indiana's whole, they're shooting about 38% from the outside, but they're not doing the world's greatest job on the glass. They've been outside the top 175 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. They've been allowing quite a few second and third chances as well, and I think that that's Minnesota's opportunity to be able to hold in there. As we know, these home court environments out there in the Big Ten, they are absolutely rambunctious, even though it's still December. I do think that you're going to be finding that, and Minnesota should see some positivity with the fact that they're allowing teams to shoot 38.5% from the outside. You've got Kate Tyson, who's been able to give you 22.5 points. He's shooting 36% from three-point range. Langston Reynolds, Isaac Usama have been solid in the backcourt, as these two guys are combining for about 7 assists, 19 points per game for Minnesota. Not going to generate a ton of turnovers or anything like that, but they've been a top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that interior play that you were able to get out of Jalen Crooker or Johnson, who's been able to, at 6'8", give you 12.5 points, 9 boards, is going to be just enough for this team to hold in there. And then Robert Viola, 7.5 rebounds per game. I think Minnesota is going to be looking to slow this game down a little bit more. Indiana has been a relatively mid-tempo team thus far, and Niko Medved seems, even going back to when he was over at Colorado State, pretty slow, pretty controlled. Minnesota, about 321st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I did take a swing here on the over because I do think that Indiana is still going to be pretty efficient with regards to their offense, so I do like the over, especially with the fact that we might get some late game fouling, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Minnesota. 701, 702 was supposed to be North Carolina T and Charlotte. They played yesterday, so that game is off the board. We move on. 703, 704 on the card. Columbia is going to be playing us Hofstra, and the pride of Hofstra Hofstra find themselves as a 1.5 to a 2-point underdog. Total on this game, it is 142.5, and instead of 12, a 150.5. I'm in on the over. Got a Hofstra team that's ascended into the top 125 in terms of total possessions per game. Kevin Hovde, who comes over from Florida, has actually really slowed this thing down. Columbia is about 271st in terms of total possessions per game, but Columbia is shooting the tar out of the ball right now. They're shooting almost 42% from three. That's a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. And then with this Columbia team as well, they do turn the ball over too much. They're turning the ball over about 14 times per game, but they have been dominant on the glass. Number 7 in the country in terms of rebound percentage. They're doing it on the offensive side of things, and they're generating for themselves second and third chances. You've got Zanu Ndi Bedri, who comes over from Algeria, 13 points, 7.5 boards. He's shooting 44% from three. Jared O'Keefe is shooting 39.5% from three. Heck, out of your top 4 scorers, they're all shooting at least 39.3% from three. I think there might be a little bit of a fall off there, and they're doing it all with Avery Brown only playing in 3 games, one of their main returners from a season ago. Kenny Nolan has been rock solid, 17 points, 3 assists. He's shooting 41% from three. It's very apparent that our good friend and Mr. Hovde knows how to coach, and he faces off against a Hofstra team that has been middle of the road in just about everything. Not great, not terrible. You got a really nice guard in Cruz Davis, 19 points, 5.5 assists. He's shooting 41% from three. And then German Plotnikov has been able to give you about 10 points. He's shooting 37.5% from three. You got James Boogie Patterson coming on over from Iona. Love that name. 11 points, 5 boards. And then Preston Eadman has been able to give you 6 assists per game. It's a Hofstra team that's turned the ball over 13 times per game. They're a little bit below average in terms of ball security, but again, I think that they're going to have a tough time with Columbia down low. They are back to being middle of the road in terms of guarding the 3-point ball as well. Last year, they were about 184th in opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, currently 196th. Not terrible, but again, not great. And Silas Sunday is a true 7-footer who just hasn't necessarily been able to blossom. 5.5 points, 5.5 boards. You'd expect a little bit more there. And I do think that Columbia continues to find a way to be able to get the job done. Hofstra, a middle of the road team in terms of generating turnovers. So I do like a higher scoring game with Columbia knocking down threes. I set them as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Made my total a 150.5. I'm also in on this over. 705, 706 on the card. It is Furman, and they are on the road against Elon. Elon is a 2.5 point home underdog. Total on this game between 152.5 to 153, and I said Elon is a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. I was high on this Furman team coming into the year. I thought that they were the favorites in the SoCon. I've had to really adjust on them. This has been quite disappointing. Now, they're still pretty efficient with their 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 30 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. They're shooting 29% from three. PJ Smith being out of the fold from a season ago is really hurting this team. You've had Charles Johnson, Cooper Bowser, 6'11" big men returning from a season ago. Be rock solid down low. Johnson is able to pop it from three, but only had about 26.5%, 10.5 points, 10 rebounds per game. Cooper Bowser has been able to give you about 11 points, 6 rebounds per game. And then you've got Asa Thomas, who's been able to give you about 11.5 points per contest. He's shooting 34.5% from three, but you just expected a little bit more pizzazz in the backcourt as Alex Wilkins, he's been able to come in. He's given the team 18.5 points as a freshman, and he's really had to lead the way for the team as Tom House is only about 2.5 points per game. He has been nowhere to be found this season. And then for Elon, this has become a top 150 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Last year, they were quite slow. This year, they're in the upper half of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Copper Klanzish, who comes over from St. Joe's, he has been anything but an average Joe. 10 points, 6.5 boards, 3 assists, and he's currently shooting 45.5% from three. That'll go downward, but you've had Randall Pettis, the second, come in, shoot 46% from three, 15 points per game after he was a solid guard over at Northern Kentucky last few seasons. And Chandler Cothrell, he's been the main man. He comes over from Purdue Fort Wayne. He's right now giving the team 23 points, 8 boards. It is shooting only about 30% from three, but it's generating a little bit over a steal per contest. It is an Elon team that is leaving something to be desired with their overall defense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and this has been an Elon team that's been amazing at generating second and third chances. Even though they lose their 7'4" big man and Matthew Von Komen, they've still been a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, with having Cothrell be able to lead the way with 8 rebounds per game. And with a Furman team that just has not been able to get great guard play, I do think that Elon finds a way to get the job done, and do think that this is going to be a little bit more of an up and down game. Elon has experienced a nice tempo shift upward for Furman. They're right now 3rd or 4th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. At their core, they're a little bit of a faster team, so I'm going to be willing to take a 155 or less to the over right now, seeing this more around a 152.5, and I like Elon on the money line. 707, 708 on the card. You can see Wilmington is playing against Marshall. Marshall is an underdog of 9.5 points set on this game. It is 151 after a 152. 2. And with Wilmington, I did set them as a favorite of 10.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with them. For this Marshall squad, it's just been a case where the sloppiness in terms of backcourt has been really tough as they lose to Shane Mingo from the season ago, and they've been outside the top 3 in terms of ball security, 15.5 turnovers per game. Now, you've been able to have Jalen Spear give you some good contributions in so many different ways. 13 points, 6.5 assists, shooting 38.5% from 3, but 3 turnovers per game has been rough. And then Noah Utstal has been able to come in and give you about 11 points, 4.5 boards, 4 assists, but 3.7 turnovers per game and shooting less than 30% from three-point range. That's a little bit of an issue for Marshall. They do have the 7'4" big man in Matthew Van Komen, who he does a great job with the shot blocking, 2.5 blocks, 10.5 points, right around about 8 rebounds per game. But again, it's a Marshall team that's been aligned quite a bit from the outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They're okay, but not necessarily amazing at generating turnovers themselves. And you've got a Wilmington team that can actually match up down low, as they've got a true 7-footer in Patrick Wessler, who comes on over from Virginia Tech, as he's been able to supply about 11.5 points, 8 boards per game. Nolan Hodge is one of the main holdovers from the season ago, 15 points, 5 boards. He's right now shooting 45% from three-point range. Wilmington as a whole shooting 39% from 3. That should be going downward a little bit, but they keep things clean. They only turn the ball over about 11 times per game. They're back in the top 75 in terms of their overall rebound percentage as well. They've done a nice job holding it down low, as they're a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Wilmington checks so many boxes, and this is a Wilmington team that it feels like they're one of those teams that if you need them to play fast, they'll play fast. If you need them to play slow, they'll play slow. At their core, about 314th in the country right now in terms of total possessions per game. Marshall is 46th, but I think that Wilmington going to be able to put up some nice numbers on Marshall, be able to slow them down. I think that Marshall is going to be costed by their turnovers. Semi-total 146.5, like the under end with Wilmington. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with them. 7:09, 7:10 on the card. It is LSU, and they are going to be on the road against Boston College. Boston College, a home underdog of 7.5 to 8.5 points, 146.5 to 148 is the total. I set my line at 7.5, 8 plus. That becomes my buy point on Boston College. LSU has been incredibly efficient on offense. Currently a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Boston College has actually been a pretty solid defense. The offense has been leaving a whole heck of a lot of something to be desired, though. This is a Boston College team as well outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, as they're shooting 27% from 3. Now, I do think that there's some positivity coming for this offense because they actually do a nice job in terms of protecting the ball. Boston College has only turned the ball over about 9.5 times per game, a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Problem is, you've got Fred Payne, Donald Hand, and not Oleg Waddell. These two guys have been combining for about 28.5 points per game. You got these two guys combined to shoot less than 30% from 3. Payne shoots 33% from 3. Hand is shooting 16% from 3-point range. Right now, your top shooter is Bowden Kapke, 6'11" big man who's been able to give you 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, shooting 39% from 3, but you don't have a lot of pop there. It is a Boston College team that's been okay on the glass. You've got Aiden Shaw, who's been able to give you about 9 or so rebounds per game. They've been a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but you do have an LSU team that I think should be able to do a pretty rock solid job down low. You've got Jalen Reed back, who at 6'10" has always been a pretty rock solid 3-point shooter. Still some injuries, but 9.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Michael Nwoko, all of a sudden his offense has really been able to come out of the woodwork. 17.5 points, 6 boards. Love what he's bringing to the table. And then De'Don Thomas has been able to keep things very clean and efficient for LSU. Comes over from UNLV, 7 assists, 14.5 points per game, while turning the ball over 1.3 times per game. Shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Markel Sutton has been able to give you good versatility from Omaha, 12.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. So I love what these guys are bringing to the table. And for this LSU team, it's not as if their overall efficiency has been based around just super hot 3-point shooting. 36% is good from 3, but it's not unrealistic. They've been just pile driving the ball down low. They're a top 10 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. Now, they don't force any turnovers on defense. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but in Boston College, that's all that they've really been doing well. LSU has been a top 55 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but I do think that in the end, Boston College finds a way to hold in there. I think that the 3-point shooting percentage, which has been awful, it sees a little bit of a rise up, and this is still a true road game for LSU. So I did set a line here of a 7.5. I'm going to be willing to take 8 plus here with Boston College. I think you're close enough for late game falling in. This is an LSU team that just consistently under Coach McMahon, they've been right around about 75th in the country in terms of total possessions. Boston College more around 252nd. Did set a total of 149.5 7.5. I like the over. 7-11, 7-12 on the card. It is Belmont, and they play us to Richmond. And the Itsy Bitsy Spiders of Richmond are an underdog of 5.5 points. So on this game, it is 153.5 to 154.5. Made Richmond an underdog of 7 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Belmont. Richmond has actually cranked up their tempo a little bit more. They've become a mid-tempo team this season after last few years. This has always been a pretty slow and controlled team. Meanwhile, you've got a Belmont squad that's right now playing once again pretty fast. 76th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But Belmont, after being dreadful on defense last season, they're back in the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, with generating turnovers being really the forte of this team. They're a top 85 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Their holding teams are right now shooting 26% from three, and that's a number that's going to be going very much northward. But still, you've got Tyler Lundblade and Sam Orme, a pair of guys that are right around 6'6" and 6'8". They're just absolutely lighting it up. These two guys have been able to combine for about 33.5 points per game. Lundblade is shooting 41% from the outside. Orme is shooting 38.5% from three, and Orme has been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. You've got Jabez Jenkins, who's really been able to help out down low as well. As out of your top 6 scorers right now for Belmont, all but one of them are giving you at least 4.9 rebounds per game. That includes the point guard, Nick McClain, who's been giving out 7 assists per game. He's been able to throw in there about 4.9 rebounds per game. I love what he's been able to bring to the table, shooting about 39% from three-point range with his 9.5 points per game as well. And then for Richmond, this team has been much better on the glass than they have been in past years. Last year, they just couldn't grab an offensive rebound to save their lives, and now they're doing a great job in terms of not allowing their opponents to grab a lot of second and third chances as well. Top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You've had Jonathan Beagle do a nice job as more of an ancillary scorer with about 7.5 points per game, but he's thrown in there 6.5 rebounds per game. You've had Michael Walsby, again, a guy that's only giving you about 6 points per game, but he's throwing in there about 7.5 rebounds per game. AJ Lopez, Shaden Daughtry, these guys have both been able to give you between about 10.5 to 11 points per game, as it's a whole greater than some of its parts approach. I mean, Lopez is right now your top scorer with 11 points per game, but you've got 9 different guys who are giving you at least 5.6 points per game, including David Thomas, who's been able to shoot 43.5% from three-point range. Richmond shooting 33% from three. Neither here nor there. They've been able to hold quite a few teams down. They've faced against some lesser competition that has warped their defensive numbers a little bit, but I do think that in the end, you do have a game that is going to be involving a Belmont team that is much improved on defense, and I do think that they get the job done against a Richmond team that is going to be looking to fly a little bit more, but I could see turnovers being a little bit costly to the Soul. Semi-total 153, so you're at the 154 like the under of the Belmont. I'm willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 7-13, 7-14 on the card. Omaha is going to be playing us in Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado, 1.5 to 2 point favorites. So on this game, it is 158.5, and I said Omaha is a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be able to take a shot on them on the money line for Northern Colorado. This is always a team that is incredibly efficient with regards to both their 2-point shooting percentage and not allowing second and third chances on the glass, because a lot of people think Northern Colorado, they think of the good 3-point shooting, and right now they're shooting 37.5% from three, and teams against them are shooting 23.6% from three. That'll be going northward, but also a team that's in the top 30 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage. They've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage after they were in the top 10 last season. Lost a few guys from last year's team, but you've still been able to have Egan Shields be able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. Brock Wisney, he's back from season ago, and he's doing it all. 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, a steal, 14.5 points per game. While Quinn Denker, the transfer from Idaho, he's been able to give you 6.5 assists. He's thrown in there 18 points. And Zach Block, right now shooting 58.5% for three with his 14.5 points per game. Again, that should be going a little bit further downward, but that said, I do think that this Northern Colorado team is going to be broken a little bit by the fact that they don't generate a lot of turnovers. That's going to allow for some clean possessions for Omaha, a team that just hasn't been quite the same offensively as they were in conference play last year. You'll notice that last year as well, they had a little bit of a tough time with their offense to begin the season. It picked up steam as the season went along. The 13 turnovers per game have been a little bit unsightly, but his team does have a lot of the ancillary pieces that took them to the NCAA tournament back from the season ago. You need to get more out of Cameron Thomas. 6'8" combo players give you 7.5 points, 4.5 boards, but Lance Waddles, Tony Osborne in the backcourt, they're combining for just under 32 points per game. Waddles is shooting 45.5% from three, and Omaha is shooting about 37.5% from the outside. They've been outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they've been getting pile driven down low. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so that's going to be leading to a little bit of issue. You got a Northern Colorado team that they're going to typically play a little bit more up-tempo. They're 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Omaha, they've been experiencing a few different tempos the last few seasons, but they're more around about 117th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I do think that you're going to be able to get quite a few points upon the board. So I might total 159.5. I like the over, but with Omaha, did set them as the slim 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. 7:15, 7:16 on the card. It is Monmouth. They play us at Princeton. Princeton is an underdog of 3 points. So on this game, it is 143.5. Set Monmouth as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Princeton is outside the top 265 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're right now dealing with an injury to their top scorer, Dalen Davis, as well. This is just not a good Princeton team as of right now, and this team never does a great job in generating second chances. Now, to their credit, they're a top 40 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage as well, so they're not allowing opponents to get second and third chances, but they're outside the top 330 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Not a defense that really generates a lot of turnovers, and now with Dalen Davis dealing with injury, you've got Jackson Hickey, who's having to really do a little bit of everything. 2.5 assists, 14 points, 4.5 boards, shooting 40% for 3, and Jack Stanton is now shooting 40% for 3 with his 11 points per game, but Princeton has become a mid-tempo team after they were playing slowly last year, losing a lot of guys and trying to crank up the tempo. I don't necessarily think is the way to go, and you've got a Monmouth squad that they're typically based around like one really good scorer like Xander Rice a few seasons ago. You had Abdi Bashir last season. They've been a little bit more balanced, and they've slowed themselves down quite a bit as well. They're about 270th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a guy in Jack Collins who's not necessarily going to completely take over the game with his scoring, but he's just been able to stuff the stat sheet. He's given the team in that neighborhood about 8.5 points, 6 boards, 4.5 assists per game, and then you've got a trio of guys, Stefanos Spitalis, Jason Rivera-Torres, and Justin Ray, all between 13.4 and 14.4 points per game, with Ray being the ray of sunshine from 3, shooting 47.5% from 3. Team is still very bad with their 2-point shooting percentage. Last year they were a bottom team in all of college basketball in that regard. They're still outside the top 275 there, but they've been a little bit better on the glass, and they do have someone in Doc Mortar who doesn't give you a lot of scoring, but he gives you a block and a half down low. Rivera Torres has been able to give you nearly 2 blocks per game, so the team has been very good on the interior. They're allowing teams to shoot about 35.5% from 3. I think we should see a little bit of positivity there, and I do think that with the Princeton team that's just all sorts of, shall we say, in transition and not having Dalen Davis out there, I do think that Monmouth finds a way to be able to get the job done. I think that Princeton is going to get back to the roots, start to slow things down a little bit in terms of their tempo. So it's at a total of 139. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be one to lay with Monmouth. 7:17, 7:18 on the card. Evansville is going to be playing against Ball State. Ball State is an underdog of 6 points. 137 is the total. And I said Evansville is a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be able to take a shot here on Ball State. Ball State, a top 35 defense in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but do have an Evansville unit that has been relatively okay at taking care of the ball, about 12 turnovers per game. Really, the issue has been their 3-point shooting. They're shooting 28.5% from 3-point range, as you've got a team that has been pretty solid down low. Connor Turnbull, Joshua Hughes, these two guys are combining for about 9.5 rebounds per game, and then Gashawn Porter, he's been able to come in from NC Central, and he's been able to give the team about 9.5 points per game, but that said, they just really haven't found a lot of facilitation outside of Leaf Moeller, who's only giving you about 6.5 points per game, 4.5 assists per game, but he does have those 2.5 turnovers per game. That said, you do have a Ball State team that has been all sorts of suspect with regards to their offense as well, and they're turning the ball over a little bit too much. They need to try to exploit the fact that Evansville is allowing teams to shoot over 35% from 3-point range, but I'm not sure if Ball State is going to do the best job of being able to do so. They're shooting 31.5% from the outside. You got Davion Hill and Amrani Ziegler in the backcourt, combining for about 24 points per game, and Hill shooting about 35.5% from the outside, but not a ton down low for this Ball State team, who is currently well outside the top 250 in terms of rebound percentage. And in a nip and tuck game, Ball State is shooting 64.5% of the free throw line. That's a little bit of an issue as well. This is a Ball State squad that's also been outside the top 250 in opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage themselves. Elmore James has come over from Ohio. He's giving you 8.5 points, and he's currently shooting 26.5% from 3-point range. Outside of Davion Hill, among your top 5 scorers, none of them shoot above 29.5% from 3-point range. I do think that for Evansville, though, the fact that they're giving up a lot from the outside and they're having their turnover issues does allow Ball State to be able to remain lively. Neither of these teams are really looking to push tempo. You've got Ball State currently outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Evansville, they're checking in about 284. So interesting circumstance here. I did set my total 135.5. I think that you're just close enough for late game following, but even with that, I don't know if that's going to be enough for the over, so like the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Ball State. 7:19, 7:20 on the card. UMKC is going to be playing against Idaho State. Idaho State is a 5.5 point favorite on the road. Total on this game, it is 140.5, and with the total I set mine at a 137.5, I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on the under. With Idaho State, this is traditionally a relatively controlled team, and UMKC last year was outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game. They've been looking to push a bit more tempo at 60th in terms of total possessions per game. I think that they return to their roots, while Idaho State is 310th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I have to have some question marks with regards to backcourt play of Idaho State, though. You lose Dylan Dylan Darling in the offseason. They've been trying to replace him with Jamison Guerra. He comes over from the non-D1 ranks, 4 assists, 7.5 points per game, but it is an Idaho State team that has been outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, and they're only shooting about 30% from three-point. This team was very much based around rebounding last season. They are, once again, this year a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage, as you've got Caleb Vandergreen, who's been able to give you 15 points, 7 boards. He's leading the way, and he's actually coming off the bench for that. Nobody else is giving you over 5 rebounds per game, as Evan, who's returning from the season ago, 4.5 boards, block, and half per contest, but only 3.5 points per game. Lachlan Brewer has been able to come over from Sacramento State, 7.5 points, assists and a half per contest. He's not shooting it well from three-point range like they need him to be. And Connor Hollenbeck, one of the main returners, 13 points. He's shooting 40% from three, but it's been all over the place with this team. And for this UMKC bunch, certainly it's been a bit less than savory for them here this season, especially with falling outside the top 225 now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But he should be able to win this battle down low. Jerome Palm along Chris Dockery. These two guys have nice size. They've been able to combine for about 11.5 rebounds per game. Uriah Evans is doing a great job, give you 13.5 points per game. Now, it's a UMKC team that should see some positivity with the fact that they are shooting 26% from three-point, allowing opponents to shoot 36.5% from three. As a matter of fact, they've been outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, but they're still a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They themselves have been getting a little bit sloppy with the ball, but UMKC, I do think that there's reason to believe that they're going to be able to rebound a little bit more. They have been an offense that has been looking to slow down just a little bit more. They've had to face off against the likes of TCU, Texas, so they've been playing some good competition, and I do think that this team finding a main facilitator in Evans, who's been able to give you 3.5 assists per game, and the fact that they should see some positivity with their three-point shooting allows them to get the job done what I think is going to be a grimier and slower game. I set my total at a 137.5. I like the under, and I do like this UMKC team outright on the money line. 721, 722 on the card. South Dakota State is on the road against Northern Arizona. Northern Arizona is a 2.5 point home underdog, and total on this game is anywhere between 148.5 to a 149.5. And with Northern Arizona, something that's a 4.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay with South Dakota State for Northern Arizona. Trying to replace Carson Tauta has been difficult, and really each of their top 3 scorers from a season ago. Now, we'll say they've been able to get a lot of good production out of Zach Davidson. He's come in, give the team 17 points, 7 boards, 6'8", do-it-all player that has also been able to shoot 50% from 3, albeit on very, very low volume, but for Northern Arizona, they become a nice three-point shooting team at 38%. Have to think that there's going to be a fall-off, especially from the fact that they shoot 61.7% the free throw line. That's a bottom 20 mark in all of college basketball. They've done a nice job winning the turnover battle. They're a top 85 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Not quite the same rebounding team that they were a season ago. You've been able to get good production out of Ryan Abelman, who's been able to supply the team with about 12 points. He's throwing in there about 6.5 rebounds per game, and he's also been able to give you about 2 steals per game as well. But with Davidson, I know he's out with a little bit of injury. Last 2 games, he's been able to come back. He's been able to look relatively solid, so not really a lot of concern there. But for South Dakota State, took them a little bit of time with the coaching change that we saw in the offseason. They now hand the keys on over to Brian Peterson, but they maintain a lot of their guys from the season ago, and it feels like they've really been able to find their bearings. They did have that absolute butt kicking against Utah Valley, but that said, this team has been able to do a solid job defensively, not the same team offensively that they've been in past years. Right now, they're shooting 31% from 3, which I do think is doing for some positivity. Jaden Jackson has right now been your top scorer. He's supplying the team with 12 points, and he was a little bit more of an ancillary guy a season ago, as he and Joe Saylor combined to shoot about 32.5% from 3. Saylor, who returns from season ago, about 11 points, 2.5 assists per game. And for South Dakota State, even though the three-point shooting is down, the amount of turnovers that they're generating on defense is up. They've been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. The squad has also been one of the better rebounding teams in terms of defensive rebound percentage in all of college basketball. This despite the fact that they lose Oscar Clough, as you only have one guy that's really giving you about 5.5 rebounds per game. That'd be Damon Wilkerson, who's been able to give you 10.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. But Kellen Gary's back from a season ago. Good versatility out of him. 7.5 points, 5.5 boards, a steal, 2 assists per game. Matthew Moores, who began his career at Wisconsin, he stands about 6'9". He's giving you 8 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. I do think that South Dakota State going to do a rock solid job down low. Now, they've been turning the ball over about 14 times per game, so they're probably going to lose that turnover battle. But that said, you've got a South Dakota State team that, under this new regime of Mr. Peterson, great name, they're looking to slow themselves down in terms of total possessions per game, right around about 215th in all of college basketball. You've got a Northern Arizona team that is relatively mid-tempo at 133rd. I did set my total at a 146.5. I do think that there's positivity to them for South Dakota State from 3-point range, but I think that they're becoming more of a defensive team, so I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay of South Dakota State. 723, 724 on the card. Portland State is on the road against South Dakota. The Coyotes of South Dakota are 1 to 2.5 point home underdogs, so on this game is 159.5, and I did set Portland State as the underdog of 2 points. So I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on South Dakota. I think that the travel is going to be a little bit rough for this Portland State team, and for Portland State, does feel like it's a little bit mix and match outside of Jalen Henderson, top returning guy from a season ago. He's been able to get this team 20 points, 5.5 assists. He has been rock solid, and for Portland State right now, they're shooting about 37% from 3-point range, but they're outside the top 250 in terms of guarding the 3-point line as well. They do make up for it on the glass. This has been a top 40 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're grabbing nearly 15 offensive rebounds per game, with Trayvon Minute, who began his career over at South Carolina, giving 9.8 rebounds per game, but 5 of them have been on the offensive glass. He's supplying the team with about 11.5 points per game. You've had Kelsey Phipps be able to come in, give the team about 7.5 points. He's been able to add to the backcourt a little bit more, but I do think that for South Dakota, having down low a true 7-footer and Cameron Fens is going to be able to help them out. He's been giving the team about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game. He missed a lot of time last year due to injury, but I do think that the overall backcourt is going to be able to win out here with Isaac Bruns, being able to give you 17.5 points, not shooting well from 3. South Dakota as a whole, they're shooting about 32% from the outside, but they've been remarkably improved with regards to their perimeter defense from a season ago. Right now, teams are shooting just a hair above 30% from 3-point range against them. This is a South Dakota team that has become a top 125 team in terms of generating turnovers as well. Turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and just like Portland State has been good on the glass, this has also been a top 100 team in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. That despite the fact that you really don't have that star rebounder. Fens, who I mentioned before, is 5.4 rebounds per game. That leads the way, but everyone just does a good job being able to generate those second and third chances. South Dakota back in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. Portland State looking to run a little bit more as well. So I do think that those second and third chances lead to an over. So I total 162, and with South Dakota made them a 2-point favorite, like them on the money line. 725, 726 on the card. Pacific is on the road against Air Force. Air Force is a 5.5 point home underdog. Total on this game is 134.5 and set a total of a 134. So 134.5 is my minimum buy point here on the under. You've got an Air Force squad that is looking a little bit faster than they were a season ago. That's a warp set, though. They play against IU Indy, and if you take the IU Indy game out of the fold, they're still outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, but they've been able to have a quartet of different guys give between 11 and 12.5 points per game. Caleb Walker, Eli Robinson, Cam Sanders, along with Lucas Hubben, and these guys have been able to do a solid job in terms of giving you a little bit more on the glass in the past years. Air Force last few years has been well outside the top 275 in terms of rebound percentage. They're still outside the top 185, but it's been a little bit more respectable. You've been able to have Walker be able to give you about 5.5 boards per contest, Robinson about 6.5 rebounds, and Robinson is showing in there 2.7 assists per game as well. It's an Air Force team that's still very sloppy with the ball. They're outside the top 320 in terms of ball security with about 15 turnovers per game, but they've been able to do a little bit of a better job guarding the perimeter, allowing teams to shoot about 33% from 3-point range. And for Pacific, I'm just wondering when you're going to be able to get the outburst that we were expecting out of Alexis Marmioles, who comes over from the Southland. He's only been able to get the team about 6 points per game. After last season, he was a nice double-figure scorer. Elias Ralph has been the head for this team, 16.5 points, 7 boards at 6'7", shooting 48% from 3. We'll see a little bit of a fall off there, but Jaden Clayton, TJ Wainwright, these guys have played well with one another in the backcourt. Clayton, your main facilitator, 6 assists, 8.5 points per game. Wainwright, about 12 points, 4 boards. He's shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but I do think that for this Pacific team, them being a bit sloppy with the ball, about 13 turnovers per game, and the fact that this is a unit that has been aligned quite a bit on the inside as well with regards to teams being able to do an okay job of pulling in their offensive rebounds. In Pacific, they themselves outside the top 225 in terms of getting those second and third chances. That allows this Air Force team to be able to hold in there at elevation, semi-line at a 134 with regards to the total, as you got an Air Force team as traditionally slow and controlled, and Pacific, they themselves aren't necessarily looking to push a lot of tempo. 246th in terms of total possessions per game. So at the 134.5, I'm in on the under, and like the points here with Air Force, set them as 4-point dog. 727, 728 on the card. You've got SMU, and they're going to be on the road against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is a favorite of 9.5 points. So on this game, it is 167.5, and I said a total of a 170.5. I do like the over for Vanderbilt. They are playing at warp speed, and they have been a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Got an SMU team that is playing in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. They're a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, Vanderbilt has been really good at generating turnovers. They're a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And to the credit of Vanderbilt, the top 60 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that you're going to see a little bit of regression with the fact that Tyler Tanner, Tyler Nickel, and Duke Miles, your top 3 scorers, are all shooting at least 46.3% from 3 points. Miles has led the way with 19 points, 5 assists, 2.5 steals per game. Tanner is generating 2.5 steals, 4 assists, 15 points per game, and Nickel has been able to give you 13.5 points per game. It is an improved Vanderbilt team down low as well. You bring back your top rebounder, Devin McLaughlin, who's able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game, but then Jalen Washington is able to give you about 5 rebounds per game, and Frankie Collins doesn't give you a ton of scoring. Never been a great 3-point shooter, but 3 steals, 5.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds, 9 points per game, a really good glue guy. That said, I do think that Kevin Miller is going to do a nice job of being able to keep this SMU team very lively, as he's been able to give this team over 17 points per game. Throughout his career, has been a high 33-point shooter, and he's up to about 21 points per game this season. I don't think he continues to shoot 46% from 3, but the 7.5 assists to less than 2.5 turnovers per game, that's rock solid. Corey Washington, Jerome Pierre, these were really nice scorers at the mid-major ranks from a season ago. These 2 guys have come in and they have been very rock solid. With Washington, he's been able to give you 14.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and Pierre 18.5 points per game. You've got a SMU team that shoots 36% from 3, relatively sustainable, and I think that they have the chance to be able to win the battle down low. It's Samat Yedoglu, the gentleman from Turkey, give you about 11 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, and it's been an SMU team that's held teams to shoot less than 30% from 3. I think that there's going to be a little bit of negative regression there, but even though I do think that Vanderbilt ultimately wins this game, I think that SMU, with the way that they play a similar style, they do a nice job of holding in there, and I think that you get plenty of scoring. So my total at a 170.5, like the over and the points with SMU, 729, 730 on the card. It is St. Thomas, and they are on the road against Montana State. Montana State does find themselves as a 2.5 point favorite. 145.5 to 146.5 is the total line. So Montana State is a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 2.5 with Montana State. This unit has been just very, very pesky to say the least. They don't get the job done, but they push Colorado on the road. We saw them go to overtime against Utah State as well. They have punched up against some good competition, and you've got a trio of guys, Jed Miller, Patrick McMahon, and Davion Brown, who are doing a really nice job of headlining this backcourt. These 3 guys have been able to combine for in that neighborhood about 40 or so points per contest. McMahon is right now shooting 45.5% from 3, and that's going to go downward, but team as a whole, they're shooting 37% from the outside. Montana State, as per usual, not necessarily the world's greatest team on the glass in terms of generating second and third chances outside the top 310 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're taking care of the ball with about 11 turnovers per game. It's not a Montana State team that is going to be looking to run and gun in terms of total possessions per game, even with the overtime game that we saw a few days ago. They're about 225th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. We've seen the St. Thomas team throttle down a little bit from a season ago as well. They're about 173rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and the 3-point shooting, with losing a few guys from a season ago, not quite the same, but you've got Nolan Mindsail, who's been able to do a nice job, give you 21 points per game. Now, he's only shooting 22.5% from 3, and this team should shoot better when it's all said and done than 30.1% from 3, but the problem for St. Thomas is they're not grabbing any second or third chances whatsoever. They're a bottom 5 team in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They've been doing a rough job in terms of guarding down low as well, outside the top 270 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Doing a great job on the turnover battle. Top 50 team in terms of taking care of the ball. They're a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Carter Bejerke has been able to give you 8.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, but nobody on this roster has given you over 4.2 rebounds per game. Even with Montana State not necessarily having a whole bundle of size, I do think that they win that battle down low. I do think that they get the job done against a St. Thomas team that is going to be probably looking to just generate a few turnovers. I think that they'll have some success there, but in the end, I like Montana State at home to get the job done. Set my line at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it in. Set a total of 145.5, so at a 146 plus, I'm going to be in on that total under as well. Some 31, some 32 on the card. It is Northwestern on the road against Wisconsin. Wisconsin is an 8.5 point favorite total on this game, 154.5 to a 155.5, and I set a total of a 150.5. I'm going to be in on the under. Wisconsin's now about 101st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northwestern, even with an overtime game against a very up-tempo Oklahoma State team, they're still 244th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Wisconsin doing a little bit better job at generating turnovers, a top 130 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for Wisconsin, they've been a very efficient offense. They're a top top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, shooting about 33% from three. Very sustainable number. Nick Boyd and John Blackwell have been incredible in the backcourt. They're combining for 40 points per game. It's a Wisconsin team that just by and large, they do the little things well. They're a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball. They're a top 20 team in terms of their free throw shooting percentage, but I do think that this squad is going to need to buckle down a little bit more defensively, and I think that they will. Right now, teams are shooting 37.5% from three-point range against them. They've been a little bit of a rough perimeter defense over the last few seasons, but certainly I don't think that that's sustainable, and it's a Northwestern team that right now is shooting 38.5% from three, but we're seeing this team regress pretty hard as well, as Nick Martinelli has been the main headliner once again, 20.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's right now shooting 77% from three-point range. That's going to be going down, but Arrington Page, he's come in, he's given the team 15 points, 7 rebounds for a Northwestern team that, by and large, over the last few years, they've had a tough time on the glass. They are once again this year, as right now in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they are outside the top 335 in all of college basketball. That said, they do go up against a Wisconsin team that, even though they're better on the offensive glass, they become a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, not necessarily knocking your socks off there, and Wisconsin is not allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. Top 55 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You've had Jaden Reed come over from South Florida. He's shooting about 43% from three. He's been able to supply about 6 assists. He's done a nice job of keeping this Northwestern team very efficient. They're always great in terms of not turning the ball over. Top 15 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. So makes this an interesting spot. I did set Wisconsin as an 8.5 point favorite. So right now we're seeing a mixer of 8.5 to not. I'm seeing a 9.5 out there as well. I'd be willing to take those points with Northwestern, and do think that things get slowed down a little bit. So my total 150.5. I'm in on the under 733, 734 on the card. It is Weber State playing us Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts a 7.5 to an 8.5 point underdog. A 157.5 is the total, and with Oral Roberts, I did set them as an underdog of 10.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Weber State. They have been a very supreme three-point shooting team, and it is a Weber State team that should be able to exploit an Oral Roberts defense as well outside the top 235 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Weber State, right now, they're allowing opponents to shoot 20.4% from three-point range. That is not going to be continuing, but also for this Weber State team, they become a top 75 team in terms of rebound percentage, because you've got a trio of guys right now that have been able to do a nice job supplying the team with at least 6.7 rebounds per game. Nigel Burris, who also was a north of 40% three-point shooter a few seasons ago over at Idaho. Edwin Sanchez Jr. along with Malik Goma. And Goma has been able to do a really good job in terms of giving you a little bit of versatility as well, popping a few threes, pair of assists per game. And then Tejan Siani has been a nice sort of ancillary guy for this team. 10.5 points, 4 assists, doesn't necessarily shoot it well from three, but he gets guys like Jace Whiting, who comes over from UNLV, and Boise State going, who's been able to give you 13.5 points. He's been able to shoot 41.5% from the outside, and with his team dominating on the glass, that makes them all the more lethal. Now, again, Weber State not going to continue to allow teams to shoot about 21% from three-point range, but that said, this is an Oral Roberts team that's been a little bit hit or miss. I do like the hire that they had for Corey Barnett, and you can tell that they're already more competitive. They're shooting about 32.5% from three, not great, not awful. Ty Harper has been that main guy, 16.5 points, doling out about a steal and apple contest, shooting about 36.5% from three. Last year was a rock solid player over at Youngstown St. You've had Jack Turner down for what? Give you 10 points per game. Connor Dow has been able to supply the team with about 12 points. He shoots 36.5% from three, but you've only got one player that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game. You have 2 Yamanachi Williams, who had 6'10", has good versatility, 8 points, 5 boards. He was a high 33-point shooter 2 seasons ago over at Portland, but still, this is a team that's going to have a rough time on the glass. It's a Oral Roberts team that's very much based around three-point shooting. They're taking about as many threes as they are twos, and do think that in the end, even though Weber State doing for a little bit of regression with that three-point shooting defense, that they themselves do a nice job of taking it to an Oral Roberts team that's been a little bit suspect with regards to that outside shooting, and I do think that Weber State wins from within, semi-line at 10.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Weber State. Weber State has really been pushing a lot of tempo, and we've got an Oral Roberts team here that I do think that they're going to be looking to do the same. Oral Roberts in terms of total possessions per game, 67th in all of college basketball, set my total 162.5. I'm in on the over. 735, 736 on the card. Idaho is going to be playing us in North Dakota. North Dakota is a 9.5 point underdog to this game. It is 153.5. Set my line at 8.5. I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on North Dakota. North Dakota is going to have a little bit of a tough time down low, but still, this is not an Idaho team that's necessarily generating a lot of second and third chances on the glass themselves. This unit has been doing a nice job of not allowing opponents to grab those second and third chances. Top 85 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, but they've been missing Christian Gonzalez, one of their main holdovers from ACC. season ago. So it's been Jackson Rasmussen, who's come in, give the team 15.5 points, 4 boards, who's been rock solid. And then you've got a pair of guys, Brody Woodbury, who comes over from Southeast Louisiana, and Jack Payne, who have been able to do a nice job down low with a combined about 11.5 rebounds per game, 17.5 points between the two of them. But for Idaho, your main guys have not necessarily been great three-point shooters. Your top 6 scorers, other than Gonzalez, who has only played in 1 game this far this season, are all shooting below 33% from 3. But Isaiah Brickner, who comes over from Marist, he's been able to give you about 8 points. He's right now shooting 61.5% from 3. And then guys like Miles Clapper have been able to do a nice job. For Idaho, they're always good in terms of taking care of the ball, but they don't generate any turnovers themselves. Outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they're back outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And North Dakota, they have seen their offense slip quite a bit this year. They're outside the top 2 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they've all of a sudden become a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They themselves a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with having Grayson Uhlman doing a nice job, give you 14 points, pair of assists. Right now shooting 40% from 3-point range. And then Eli King has been able to generate 2.5 steals, 5 boards. He's just doing a little bit of this and that. And then Anthony Smith has actually been coming off the bench. He's been the main facilitator with about 3 assists, 9 points per game. But do think that this is going to be a game where we do see a little bit more defense out of these two teams, as neither team is necessarily playing at a ridiculous tempo right now. With North Dakota, they're about 114th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got an Idaho team that's checking in about 236th in the country. Neither team is necessarily efficient defensively, so that has to play a little bit of a part in this as well. But did set a total 148.5. I'm in on the under and a 9+. Won't take those points with North Dakota. 737, 738 on the card. NC State is on the road. They're facing off against Auburn, and Auburn is a 5.5 point favorite. 165.5 to 167.5 is the total, and I said a total of 157.5. I'm going to be in on the under. Both of these teams are playing fast, but neither of these teams are in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. And NC State's coach, Will Wade, go back to what he did over at McNeese last year. That team was really sound defensively. Now, both of these teams are checking in outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and both teams are doing a great job in terms of taking care of the ball. So you've got an Auburn team that is, as a matter of fact, a top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but they're really geared around Keyshawn Hall doing a bit of everything. 21 points, 9 boards, 2 assists, shooting 40% from 3. Todd Pettiford is shooting less than 30% from 3. Should see a little bit of positivity there, but Kevin Overton, Elijah Freeman, these are guys that you want to see do a little bit more for this team. Now, I did set my line here at a 5.5, so I'm right now seeing a few 5s out there. That's max I'd be willing to lay. As for NC State, it does feel like they're trying to find their bearings a little bit as well, and this has been an Auburn team that has been a top 150 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. NC State doing a solid job as well, but I see a lot of regression coming for an NC State team that's right now shooting 42.2% from 3-point. Jarian Williams is one of the better players you can find in college basketball. 18.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists. He's shooting 54% from 3. We'll see that go downward, and as a matter of fact, for this NC State team, each of your top 5 scorers are shooting at least 39.6% from 3. 4 of them are shooting at least 50% from 3. Just not going to be continuing. They're going to have a tough time with having Keyshawn Murphy down low, giving Auburn over 6 rebounds per game, but Van Allen Lubin can match up with that. 12 points, 7 boards. He's been around the block. I like his game. And Kadir Copeland, he's a nice versatile player at 6'6", 13.5 points, 4.5 assists. He's been able to do a nice job shooting about 54% from 3. Again, I do think that we're going to see a little bit of aggression with that regard. I do think that Auburn is going to be able to generate a few turnovers, and I do think that that ruckus environment that you've got out there in the great state of Alabama, that is going to be just enough for this Auburn team to find a way to persevere, get the job done. I set my line at 5.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with Auburn. Set a total of 157.5. I do like the under. 739, 740 on the card. It is Montana, and they play us in North Dakota State. The Bison of North Dakota State are a 1.5 point underdog. Total game between 157.5 to 158, and with Montana, I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 1.5. North Dakota State just not the same 3-point shooting team that they were a season ago last year. Top 5 unit in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, and while I like the game of the Western Michigan transfer in Mekhi Strickland, he's been able to do a nice job getting this team 12 points per contest. He's a guy that for his career shoots less than 30% from 3-point range, so they just have been trying to mix and match and play a little bit of a different style than they did a season ago. You've been able to have a really good facilitator in Anthony Stefanowicz step up, 8 points, 5.5 assists per game for a bunch that's currently shooting 33.5% from three. That's about middle tier in all of college basketball. It's about a North Dakota State team that, by the way, has been able to step up quite a bit with regards to generating turnovers. They are now a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis after they generated no turnovers whatsoever last season, but also a team that really, other than Travion Carson, who's been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game, they don't necessarily have a ton down low. Now Montana, year in and year out, this is a unit that does not necessarily have a ton of rebounding. You've got 6'8" Trajan Sawyer, who's been able to give you about 10.5 rebounds per game, and he's leading the way, but you've got Money Williams, 19 points, 4.5 boards, 6.5 assists, shooting 38% from three-point range, best player out there on the court. And for this Montana team, this has been a squad that, even though they don't necessarily do the best job on the glass, they've been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Their own two-point shooting percentage has been in the top 75, so they do a nice job of being able to own the inside. This squad has had their tough times with regards to turnovers, 14.5 turnovers per game, so that's a little bit of an issue for this team, but I do think that the likes of Brooklyn Hicks and Keon Aguino being able to both give you 10.5 points per contest. With Hicks, he's been able to shoot 37.5% for three. It's going to be just enough to get the job done against the North Dakota State team that, again, they're looking to turn over a little bit of a new leaf. You've got a Montana team that last year was playing quite a bit up-tempo and have doubled down even further on that. They're currently 40th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And North Dakota State, even though they were really efficient on offense last year, they're actually a pretty slow and controlled team. They're more around about 108th in the country in terms of total possessions per game this season. But I do believe that North Dakota State and their just inability to knock down threes is going to really nip them here. I did set my total at a 145.5, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under. And with Montana, I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. 741, 742 on the card. It is Denver, and they play OC Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington, a 2.5 to 3-point dog. 154.5 to 155.5 is the total, and I set Denver as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Denver. They've done a really good job in terms of just restoring a little bit of order, as the last few years were really rough. They bring in a Division II coach in Tim Bergstatter. He was very good over at MSU Moorhead, and I recognize that they've only got 2 straight up wins, but you go on the road and you're able to get the job done against Colorado State, and then you're able to go on the road and you get the job done against Montana State. That really says something to me, and they've been able to play relatively tough in a lot of these games. They got blown out against Wyoming, but still held in there against UTSA, held in there against Washington, and you've got a unit that is going to lose the turnover battle. This has been a squad that's been turning the ball over about 12 times a game, outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they do a really nice job in terms of just executing their stuff on offense as well. They're shooting 35% from 3, with Jeremiah Burke being able to supply 14 points, 5 boards, good versatility there. Carson Johnson has been able to give you about 18 points, 2.5 assists per game, and when it comes to the squad, not going to be necessarily physically imposing down low. They're outside the top 300 in terms of their block shot percentage, but all sorts of versatility. Pretty much everyone on the roster, since Carson Johnson is between like 6'6", 6'8", able to light it up from 3-point range. Logan Kinsey comes on up from the D2 ranks. He's been able to get the team 11.5 points per game, and on the other end, you do have to have quite a bit of question mark with regards to this Eastern Washington team, who's been much better with regards to their outside shooting than they were a season ago. This unit last year, they just were not able to get it going under Dan Monson. Now they're shooting about 34% from 3, with Isaiah Moses coming over from UC Riverside. He's been their top man with about 18 points per game. He's right now shooting over 40% from 3, but you do have a squad that still has been very vulnerable on the glass. This team is outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage, outside the top 280 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Both teams are also allowing teams to shoot over 40% from 3. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of positivity with that regard, and it's a big reason why Denver totals have been quite high, despite the fact that Denver really doesn't play at an up-tempo pace. Denver right now 254th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Eastern Washington is looking to push a little bit more tempo. They're about 100th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that you see a little bit of a positive boost there. That's a big reason why this time I told more around a 154.5. I'm going to be in on the under, with Eastern Washington having a relatively tough time in terms of being able to guard down low as well, outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You've got Kyrie Huey, who's been able to give you about 4.5 boards, 8.5 points per game. It's not really about what we expected coming over from Miami. Emmett Marquette, who's been able to give you 6 points, only about 2.5 to 3 rebounds per game. You need a little bit more out of him down low. That does lead me to taking a shot here on Denver. I did set Denver as the 6.5 point favorite, so in on the under, and Denver laying that number. 743, 744 on the card. It is BYU and Cal Baptist doing battle. This is a neutral court game from the Delta Center, and for BYU, there's 18.5 to 19 point favorites. Totals between 149.5 to 150.5, and I did set BYU as the favorite of 17.5 points. Pretty much a home game for BYU. This is in the great state of Utah, job, but I do think that Cal Baptist has just been quite a bit undervalued recently, and with Cal Baptist, you've got one of the better mid-major scorers out there in Dominique Daniels, dealt with a little bit of a shut eye for a game or two, but he's back. He's given the team 19 points, 4.5 assists per game. Not a team that's going to wow you with their 31.5% three-point shooting, but for this Cal Baptist team, they also do a nice job in terms of both running you off the three-point line. They're a top 75 team in terms of not-allowing three-point shots, and teams are only shooting about 27.5% for three against them. I do think that that's going to go northward, but this is how you do it. Martell Williams, 15.5 points. He's been able to shoot about 40% from three-point range. It's a Cal Baptist team that's been a top 50 team with regards to rebound percentage as well. You don't necessarily get a lot of scoring out of the 7-footer and Brady Henjai, but he's been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. Jonathan Grimman, he's been able to come in there, give you about 6 boards. Shane Jackson, all sorts of versatility from Northern Arizona. 9 points, 3 assists, steal and half, 5 rebounds per game. So love what these guys are able to bring to the table. And this has been a BYU team that the offense has been the main display for this team, but right now they're holding teams of fewer than 69.5 points per game. So they've actually been able to do a pretty rock solid job there. They have been able to really do a nice job in the turnover department as well. They're a top 35 team in terms of not turning the ball over. They're not generating a ton of turnovers themselves, but I like what AJ Devanza is able to bring to the table. He and Richie Saunders are right now combining for about 39 points per game, and Saunders is shooting 43% from three. It's a BYU team that they've obviously got a lot of grades to shooting. Devanza is the only other top 5 scorers shooting about 42.9% for three. I think you get a little bit of regression there. Obviously, an amazing shooting team, but I don't know if that's necessarily sustainable. Devanza has actually been your top rebounder, though, as the only guy that is also giving you over 5.5 rebounds per game other than Saunders is Kebakita. He's been rock solid on low. Give the team 2 blocks, 6 rebounds per game, but I do think that the overall rebounding of Cal Baptist is going to be able to help them hold in there. And for BYU, they're playing a little bit more slowly than they did in past seasons, about 193rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Got a Cal Baptist team that's about 253rd, but I do think that the three-point shooting is going to be warm in this game. I do think the Cal Baptist experiences a little bit of regression with the way that they've been guarding the arc as well, so I did set a total here of a 153.5. I'm in on that over, but I'm going to be willing to take the points with Cal Baptist. 745, 746 on the card. It is Rice. We give our to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls playing us to Texas State. Texas State, an underdog of 2.5 to 3.5 points. 134.5 to 135 is the total, and I did set Rice as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This is a Rice squad that has been very much up and down in terms of their backcourt play, but they've been able to clean up a lot of the turnover woes that they have from the season ago. And you've got a Texas State team that they shoot it well from three, but they don't necessarily take a lot of threes. Right now, this team is shooting about 34.5% from three, but they are taking the lowest amount of three-point shots per game of any team in all of college basketball. Mark Drone, who was a very highly touted junior college guy 2 seasons ago, he's been able to give the team about 11 points per game. This team has been looking to Caden Gums to be a little bit more of a facilitator after he was a bit more of an off-the-ball scorer. He season ago, 7.5 points, 4 assists, GCOs per contest, but this is going to be a Texas State team that needs to clean up a little bit more with regards to the just ball security. They're right now outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and this is a Texas State squad that they're well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. It's a Rice team that's not necessarily going to be looking to run it and gun it themselves under a guy in Rob Lanier, who I think is a pretty rock solid coach. They're right now clocking in about 142nd in terms of total possessions per game, and that's with playing some up-tempo competition. And for Rice, all about Nick Anderson coming over from the SWAC, giving the team 15.5 points per game. He's been able to give a nice lift to the likes of Jalen Smith, Cam Carroll, and Trey Borneau. I mean, all three of these guys between 2.4 to 2.7 assists per game, so they've been doing a lot of facilitation by committee. Smith and Borneau have been able to combine for about 25.5 points per game, and both are shooting about 39% for three. Anderson is shooting 47% for three. I do think that we see a little bit of a fall off here against the Texas State team that has been pretty solid in terms of guarding the perimeter. For Rice, they've been a top 125 team in terms of generating turnovers for us on a per possession basis, and even though they don't necessarily have the world's greatest amount of size, you do have a team that does a good job rebounding by committee with Jimmy Aldakun along with Andrew Akuchi being able to combine for a little bit over 10 boards between the two of them, about 11 points per game, and I do think that Rice is going to be able to do a nice job on the inside. You just have not been able to get a lot, by the way, out of Louisiana Monroe transfer Jalen Bolden for this Texas State team as well. He's only been able to give the team 4.5 points per game after being a double-figure scorer 8 seasons ago. So did set a total of 138.5. You've got a Rice team playing relatively mid-tempo. I think that you're close enough for late game fouling, so in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Rice. Go Owls, 747, 748 on the card. Texas is playing us to Virginia. Virginia does find themselves as a 2.5 point underdog. 153.5 to 154 is the total line for Virginia. I did set them as a 5-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay with Texas. Took Texas a little bit of time for the backcourt to really find their bearings, as you just have not necessarily gotten the same amount of scoring that you're expecting out of Jordan Pope along Draymond Mark. But last few games, these guys have been able to get a little bit more online, still only combining for about 22.5 points per game. You do expect that to go northward, but what has been a really nice surprise for this team has been the floor and line transfer in Matos Volakaitis, who's been able to give you 15.5 points, 7 boards, a little bit over a block per game to really headline a Texas team that has been able to do a great job in terms of grabbing second and third chances. This team is right now a top 35 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage. Now, Texas not generating a lot of turnovers. They are outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they should be able to hold up against a Virginia team that has brought in a pair of international men of mystery that has been able to allow them to be very good down the the Ritter has been able to give you 18 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Jonah Grunlow has been able to supply about 7.5 rebounds per game. It is a Virginia team that, they're playing more up-tempo than they did a season ago, but it's not like this is going to be a team that's going to be playing at warp speed by any stretch of the imagination. You go back to what Coach Odom did over at VCU, and they're right now, Virginia is 259th in terms of total possessions per game. That's relatively what you can expect. Meanwhile, under year number 1 in Sean Miller, Texas playing a little bit slower than you would think, about 180th in terms of total possessions per game, but also like what Lasina Traore has been able to bring to the team, 7+ rebounds after 2 years ago at Long Beach State. He was a double-double machine. You got Malik Thomas for this Virginia team, give you about 13.5 points. He's shooting only about 32.5% from 3, but team as a whole for Virginia, they're shooting about 36.5% from 3-point. You're doing an amazing job of grabbing offensive rebounds. They actually lead all of college basketball in terms of their total offensive rebounds per game, and they've been able to take care of the ball, 9.5 turnovers per game. So it's an interesting spot here. I do think that it's not necessarily going to be an up-tempo game, but that said, I do think that it's going to be a relatively efficient game. I do think that you're going to see a little bit of regression with Virginia grabbing those second and third chances. They have played teams that just have not necessarily been sizable, and I do think that Okan and Yasu down low for Virginia going to be a nice rim protector. You also have a Virginia team that has been just a little bit spotty with the way that they've been guarding the arc as well, allowing teams to shoot 32.5% from 3, but I do think that interior defense going to be strong. Texas, they've been pretty strong with regards to their interior defense as well, top 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So set to 147. I like the under, and with Texas, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4.5 with them. 749, 750 on the card. Georgia Tech is going to be playing against Mississippi State. Mississippi State is a road 2.5-point favorite total on this game. It is 149 to 149.5, and set it to 140.5. I like the under. You got a Georgia Tech team that is in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. Much of that is due to the fact that night number 1, they played that double overtime game against Maryland Eastern. Sure, you take that out of the fold, and they've been a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, but for Georgia Tech, top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Dreadful on offense. They're outside the top 280 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 260 in both 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and they shoot 61% at the free throw line. That's a big reason why I did set them as a 4.5-point underdog, but still, this team has been able to do a nice job as being a top 130 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've been a top 40 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they go up against Mississippi State team that under Chris Jans, they've never been better than 270th in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. They're a little bit better this year, but still not great, even though you've been able to have a really good production out of Joshua Hubbard. He's been able to give the team over 20 points per game, but it's all about who's going to be able to step up around he and Jay Nepps, who have been able to give you 15 points per game. Jamoria McGee was a 40% 3-point shooter over at UAB last season, and he's right now shooting 45.5% from 3, 9 points per game, but still a lot of question marks. And when Mississippi State has really been at the height of their powers under Chris Jans, it's been all about rebounding, and now you do have 4 separate guys that will be able to give you at least 6 rebounds per game. Sean Jones Jr., Sugaji Makura, who's right now dealing with a little bit of an injury, along Quincy Ballard and Akur, but Akur only about 3.5 points per game. He's taking a massive fall off with regards to his offense. Meanwhile, for Georgia Tech, it's all been about Kwasi Reeves in terms of the outside shooting. 35% 3-point shooter, 12.5 points per game. Bain Dongo, Muhammad Siala, these guys have been very good down low with the combined 17.5 boards, 2 steals, nearly 3 blocks per contest. So I like what these guys are able to bring to the table. And then Lamar Washington, good versatility coming on over from the WCC, 8 points, 4.5 assists, 4 boards, but he really doesn't pop it well from 3. And I do think that this is going to be a sloppier game. In the end, I do think that the overall size that you got with Mississippi State is going to be able to win out, and I just have a lot of question marks with this Georgia Tech offense. So set my line at a 4.5. I'm willing to lay with Mississippi State, and on the under, set my total 140.5. 751, 752 on the card. Utah Tech is on the road against Santa Clara. The Broncos are between a 19.5 to a 20-point favorite. So this game is 143.5, and I said Santa Clara is a 19.5-point favorite, so 20 plus. I'm going to be one. Take those points with Utah Tech. Utah Tech has taken a little bit of step back with regards to their 3-point shooting for past seasons, but they've actually been able to take a little bit of step up in terms of their interior play with Ethan Potter coming over from Utah Valley. He's been able to supply 17 points, 7 boards. I like what he's bringing to the table. And then the St. Bonaventure transfer, Noah Balonga, has been able to give you 11 points, 5.5 rebounds. So these have been guys that have been pretty rock solid for this team. You've got transfer Jolo, who's been able to also give you about 12 points per game. Team as a whole shooting 28.5% from 3. I think that there's a little bit of positivity to him for them, but this is clearly not the same outside shooting team that they have been in the past. Now they've been allowing teams to shoot less than 32% from 3. That's pretty rock solid, but this is a Santa Clara team that, unlike in the past, they're not really based around 3-point shooting. They're only shooting about 33% from 3, but they've been rock solid with regards to their interior defense. As you bring back Jake Ammensinger, he, for the second straight year, is giving you more rebounds and points, 7.38 points and 7.6 rebounds per game. Elijah Mai, along with Christian Hammond, have been the heads of the St, combining for about 30 points per game, and Hammond has been able to shoot about 42.5% from 3-point range. Mai is shooting more around about 34.5% from the outside, but between the two of them, 5.2 assists per game, and though Santa Clara has taken a step back with regards to our perimeter play in terms of 3-point shooting, still only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per game, and they have been very good in terms of generating second and third chances, top 45 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and a top 20 team in terms of block shot percentage as well. Santa Clara under Herb Sendek, typically a very fast, up-tempo team. They've throttled things down a little bit more to about 260th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Utah Tech, they're about 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game as well. So I do think that you get like a middle-of-the-road sort of game. I do think that Utah Tech heats up a little bit from 3-point range. You'll allow them to cover 20 plus, so did set my line at 19.5. I do like this spot to the over as well, semi-total 145.5, so take the points with Utah Tech and the over 753, 754 on the card. San Diego State is going to be playing against Utah Valley. Utah Valley finds themselves as an 8.5-point underdog. It's on this game between 145.5 to 146, and did set a total of 142.5. I'm in on the under with San Diego State. Was a little bit rough for them out in lovely Las Vegas in terms of just getting dump truck night number 1 against Michigan, but as we found out, Michigan was dump trucking everybody, and for San Diego State, now you've got Mugun Guath back in the fold, and that is big. A true 7-footer that's able to give you some 3-point shooting, was able to supply a pair of blocks per contest last season as well. That's big to be able to pair with a backcourt that I really like. You've got a trio of guys in Darrell Harrington, BJ Davis, and Miles Bird. I'll give you between 10.5 to 11.5 points per game, and when it comes to Harrington right now, he's shooting 90% from 3-point range. We'll see that go downward a little bit as San Diego State as a whole, they're shooting about 40.5% from 3-point range. There should be a little bit of regression with that regard. It is a San Diego State team that, much like they have in the past, they play a little bit more up-tempo in non-conference play, and then they slow down when it comes to conference play. Right now, San Diego is 68th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. A little bit of a warp set. They play the double overtime game against Troy. Utah Valley is typically a team that they play tenacious on defense, but they're not afraid to run themselves. Right now, they're about 120th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Reese Waters, by the way, for San Diego State right now, leading the way of 14 points per game. He's been rock solid coming off of injury, but for Utah Valley, I do think that it's going to be a little bit rough for them in terms of their overall offense, as right now they're shooting 37% from 3-point range. I think that that's a byproduct of playing some bad competition. The Utah Valley has been a top 75 team in terms of their turnovers forced on a per possession basis on defense, but they themselves are turning the ball over nearly 13.5 times per game. Trevon Leonard is a really nice point guard that returns from a season ago, doing it all. 12.5 points, 5.5 boards, 6.5 assists. He's shooting 50% for 3 again. We'll see a fall off there. And Tyler Hendricks, he's shooting 57% for 3, 12.5 points per game himself. But for this Utah Valley team, not quite the same rebounding team that they've been in the past. Right now, they are outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're allowing teams to shoot only about 29% for 3, and they've been a top 20 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So I do think that you get a little bit more of a slog of a game, but I do think that the shot blocking in Mugun Wyeth, coupled with the fact that Utah Valley has been sloppy with the ball, cost them here. I said San Diego State as a 12.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number, and I'm in on the underside. I told 142.5. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game, 755, 756. You've got UCLA on the road against Washington. Washington is a between 1 to 1.5 point favorite to a 1 to 1.5 point underdog. You've got half the books having UCLA as a favorite, half Washington, and it's all on this game between 140.5 to a 141.5. It's at a total of 138.5. I do like the under. UCLA has been outside the top 250 thus far in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but still playing nice and slow, 258th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I think that the defense picks up, and for Washington, they're currently 79th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Warp set, they play that double overtime game against Southern, so if you take that out of the fold, they're a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, and for Washington, they have to deal with the injury to Hans Steinbach, and that has been very much hurting them, as when this guy has been out there on the court, he has been one of the better players in all of college basketball. 14.5 points, 12.8 boards, 2.5 assists per game. Not necessarily a guy that's going to go into flamethrower mode from 3-point range, but something that you do want to be taking note of, and it does look like Hans Steinbach should be able to make some sort of an impact in this game. He's back at practice, but I don't think that he's necessarily going to be 100%, and that's going to be impactful for a Washington team that may have been pretty solid on the glass, a top 100 team with regards to their rebound percentage. They've been a top 75 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but again, they're playing against a lot of outgun competition, and this is a unit that could be hit or miss from 3-point range. Zoom Diallo at the controls has been able to give you about 2.5 assists, 13.5 points per game, and then Wesley Yates, rock solid player with 17 points per game. They now have Desmond Claude back, but he hasn't been scoring the same way they did over at USC a season ago. He's only been able to give the team about 12 points per game, and for UCLA, it's taken them a little bit of time to adjust to Donovan Dent, but you just have a lot of star power with regards to these guards, and you've still got the Daily Show and Tyler Bilodeau, a pair of wings that have been able to combine for about 27.5 points per game. Both are shooting over 40% from 3. Trent Perry's been able to shoot 37% from 3. Sky Clark is shooting 42% from 3, and Perry and Clark both about 11 points per game. And then Xavier Booker, he's a 6'10" combo player that was a former top 25 recruit at Michigan State, 10.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's been able to give this team some nice versatility as well. UCLA is not generating turnovers the same way that they did a season ago, but still a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've been a top 50 team with regards to their rebound percentage. I do think that they get the job done against the Washington team. I think we'll have Steinbach back, but probably not going to be at 100%. So I'm going to be willing to take a shot on UCLA, either as a money line underdog or a very, very slim favorite. And so I told 138.5. I like the under. Now we get the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. Tennessee Tech is on the road against Lipscomb. Lipscomb is a 10.5 to an 11.5 point favorite. Totals between 115.5 to 151.5. Some on line at 9.5. I'm going to be one to take the points with Tennessee Tech. Lipscomb is starting to find some 3-point shooting, and you've got a guy that's saying 6'10" and Grant Asman that does give the team some pretty nice versatility, as he's right now supplying 13 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, shooting 44.5% from 3. You additionally have another guy that returned in Charlie Williams, who he's got a bit of versatility to his game as well. 8.5 points, only 2.5 rebounds per game at 6'10", but he's able to give you better 3-point shooting for a Lipscomb team that's been able to do a pretty solid job around the perimeter. They're a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but the sloppiness with their offense, I think, is going to be a little bit costly. This unit is turning the ball over about 13.5 times per game. They're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, and for Tennessee Tech, this is no doubt a team that's been leaving quite a bit of something to be desired, especially with the regards to their low post play. They lose Daniel Igbenegbu, their top rebounder from a season ago, but you've had great versatility with what you've been able to get out of Judge Nichols, who's been able to give you about 11 points, a block, 5 rebounds, so he's been able to do a nice job in terms of securing things down low. And then Makai Cameron, he's been in the system for the last few seasons, 11.5 points, 3.5 boards, and he's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3. It's a Tennessee Tech team that's only shooting about 28% from 3-point range, and they have a lot of opponents to shoot 38% from 3. I think that the shooting variance is going to balance out a little bit, and they've still been a nice low-post team in terms of being able to generate points from within the arc, as they've been a top 100 team with regards to 2-point shooting percentage. They themselves are turning the ball over about 15.5 times per game, and I do think that the overall sloppiness is going to be very costly to an over. You've got a Tennessee Tech team that has been about 60th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It's a Lipscomb team that, under the new coaching regime, they've been looking to push a little bit of tempo as well, about 66th in terms of total possessions per game, but I think that the turnovers cost you an over, so semi-total 149.5. I like the under and the points with Tennessee Tech. 306-503, 306-504. You've got Arkansas Pine Bluff, and they're going to be on the road facing off against Illinois Chicago. UIC is an 18.5 point favorite, 161.5 to 162.5 is the total. Set a line of 19. I am not willing to go a hair above 18.5, but I'm going to be willing to lay it with Illinois Chicago. You actually have some star power when it comes to Arkansas Pine Bluff, as you bring in Keon Williams. He was the top scorer last season over at Abilene Christian, and he's been the main headline guy for the team thus far. About 14.5 points, 6.5 boards, 4 assists, and then Jaquan Scott is actually your top scorer with about 16 points, 7 rebounds per game. Both of these guys a little bit suspect with their 3-point shooting, as Pine Bluff as a whole, they're shooting 28% from 3. And the big thing for Pine Bluff is they need to do a better job on the turnover front. Right now, they are outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, 15 turnovers per game, while they themselves are outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers. For Pine Bluff, they're playing a little bit more slowly than they did a season ago. Last year, 20th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're at 28th thus far this season, but certainly a team that's going to be looking to push a lot of tempo. And then Illinois Chicago, more of a mid-tempo team. They're about 152nd in terms of total possessions per game, and they should be able to find a lot of success against a Pine Bluff team that's outside the top 350 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and their 3-point shooting percentage. So, yeah, that's not necessarily what you want to see, to say the least. But with this Illinois Chicago team, they themselves have had quite a bit of a tough time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, but they also generate turnovers. Top 80 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've been very successful at getting to the free throw line. Pine Bluff is a team that they fell a little bit too much. And then you've got Ahmad Henderson, who's going to be the best guard in this game. 16.5 points, steal and a half, 2.5 assists per game, shooting in the mid-30s from three. Andy Johnson has come in. He's been able to shoot about 44% from the outside. And with this UIC team, they're allowing a lot of second chances. They're outside the top 325 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, but they themselves a top 100 team in terms of grabbing second and third chances as well. I do think that you get a little bit more of an up and down game here. I did set my total at a 163, so I'm in on the over and we'll lay up to 18.5 with Illinois Chicago. 306-505, 306-506. New Hampshire is going to be playing on the road against Dartmouth. Dartmouth is a 9.5 point favorite. 147.5 to 148.5 is the total, and I said New Hampshire as a 7-point underdog. I'm going to be one to take those points. It is a Dartmouth team that's been really looking to crank up their tempo. Ever since last season, they become a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game, and with Dartmouth, they do a nice job of not allowing a lot of second and third chances. Since the beginning of last season, they've been a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but a squad that has been very hit or miss with regards to the offense because they just turn the ball over too much. 14 turnovers per game. You've got Brandon Mitchell-Day, who's able to dominate down low and just gives you a bit of everything at 6'7", 6'8", 14 points, 9.5 boards, 3.5 assists, steal and a half per contest. And then you got Jaden Williams, who's been able to shoot 38% from three. Nice wing player with some versatility. Jackson Monroe has been able to give you some good production as a little bit of a do-it-all guy as well. 9 points, 5 boards, 2 assists. But Green Thomas has come in to give the team 19 points. He's actually been your top scorer. But on the flip side of things, it's a New Hampshire team that should be able to bust through a Dartmouth team that is right now allowing teams to shoot 27% from three. I think that there's going to be quite a bit of a rise there. But that said, for this New Hampshire squad, they've been able to do a pretty exceptional job on the glass. They're right now a top 190 team in terms of their rebound percentages. You've had Balil El-Shakiri be able to give you 12 points, 8 rebounds per game. Additionally, John Squire, he's been all around the block, was over at Pepperdine for the last few years, 5.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. It's a unit that as a whole, they're only shooting about 29.5% from three, but Jack Graham, their top scorer, shoots 39% from the outside. He's been able to supply the team with 12.5 points per game, and part of the reason why the offensive numbers have been a little bit rough is because Kishan Robinson, who's been one of their main guards, he comes over from Hofstra. He was dealing with a little bit of injury. He has come back the last 2 games. First game back was very rough against Brown. I don't think he had a single point in that game. Looked a little bit better in the previous game against Fairfield, and I do think that that gives the shot in the arm needed for New Hampshire to hold in this game. And I did think that you get a lot of dead possessions, and you got a New Hampshire team that they themselves not necessarily looking to push a ton of tempo. New Hampshire, in terms of total possessions per game right now, they're checking in more in the neighborhood about 298. So set a total of 147. I'm in on the under and the points with New Hampshire. 306-507, 306-508. Holy Cross is going to be playing us to Northeastern. Northeastern, a 5.5 point road favorite. 144.5 to 145.5 is the total line with Northeastern. I did set them as a favorite, just 3.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Holy Cross last year was a top 25 team in terms of their overall 3-point shooting percentage. We've seen them take a little bit of a fall off this season, and for Holy Cross, this team just never gets to the free throw line. Last year, they were dead last in the country in terms of free throw attempts per game. They're still in the bottom 40 this year, but they've also been able to do a little bit of a better job in terms of not allowing second and third chances on the glass. They've been a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're grabbing no second chances themselves, but Tyler Boston, Joe Nugent, these 2 guys have been able to combine for 27 points per game. Nugent is a 6-6 combo player that shoots 38.5% from three, throws in there about 4 boards per contest. Boston is more of a true guard who's been able to shoot 45% from three, but these are the lone 2 guys on the roster right now shooting above 33% from three. I think that there's a little bit of positivity doing for the holdover guards like DeAndre Williams, who's giving you 6 points on 25% 3-point shooting. Gabe Warren, only shooting about 30% from the outside with 7.5 points per game. Now for Holy Cross, they do not generate any turnovers whatsoever, so Northeastern, who's had a little bit of a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball. They've been turning the ball over about 14 times per game outside the top 275 in terms of ball security. That'll allow for some clean possessions for them. Northeastern has been not so great in terms of their interior defense as well. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You do do have Xander O'Leary, who's been able to give you 8 boards, 11 points per game to lock things down low, and Yuri Fritz, 14.6 half boards, capable of shooting threes, but hasn't shot as many of them this season. But you do also have a Northeastern team that has been a top 75 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've been outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage, but that said, I do think that with the way that this Northeastern team is looking to push a little bit more tempo than they have in past years, not necessarily a team that's going to just absolutely run it and gun it or anything like that, but for Northeastern, in terms of total possessions per game right now, they're checking in right around about 143rd in the country, that you are going to be able to get a little bit of scoring in this game, but I do think that the turnovers on both sides are really going to be a little bit costly with this total, but I do think that Holy Cross is going to hold in there against an interior of Northeastern that has been a little bit suspect thus far this season. So I did set a line of a 3.5. I'm going to be one take the points with Holy Cross in on the underside. I total 141.5. 306.509, 306.510. Florida National is going to be playing us Florida Gulf Coast. Dunk City does find themselves as a road 1.5 point favorite in a lot of spots. One spot, a 1.5 point underdog. So this game is 152.5, and I did set Florida National as a 3-point favorite. I like them either as a very, very slim favorite or on the money line as an underdog. You've got a Florida Gulf Coast team that just is not the same team defensively that they have been in past seasons. And for Florida Gulf Coast, last year they were well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. They've sped themselves up to being 25th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. That's supposed to be Florida National. Florida National, they are currently 58th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Florida Gulf Coast, to their credit, they're actually a top 75 team and taking care of the ball. They've been able to grab a lot of second and third chances, top 30 team. In terms of percentage of their missed shots are resulting in an offensive rebound, and you've had J.R. Kozinski come over from Notre Dame, do it all, 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, 2 steals, shooting 39.5% from 3, and Jordan Ellerby, he's eating good at the neighborhood, shooting 45.5% from the outside, but it's also a Florida Gulf Coast team that's been outside the top 225 in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And even though they're so good on the glass, they're currently outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And this is a Florida National team that over the last few years has really struggled from 3-point range, more middle of the road this year, with shooting 33.7% from the outside. But they've actually been very strong on the interior end for Florida National. Currently, they're outside the top 325 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but they're also a top 40 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. So lots of second and third chances in their games. Florida National still a dominant team in terms of generating turnovers, top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and just a lot of guys that have been able to contribute for this backcourt. Britt Harris along with Swati Jackson come on up from the mid-major ranks. They've both been able to give you 9 points per game. Now, Jackson has been dealing with a little bit of an injury, but should be good to go here. Julia Mackey along with Corey Stevenson have been really your main scorers. Stevenson, who was over at Cal State Bakersfield last season, 37% 3-point shooter, 8.5 boards, 2 assists, a steal per contest, and then Julian Mackey, who comes over from Houston Christian, about 14 points. He's been able to shoot 37% from 3-point range. They added rebounding with Larry Ojalinka, who's been able to give you about a block and a half, 7.5 rebounds per game, I think is really what sets Florida National apart. And I do think the Florida National, a team that has always been struggling with their 3-point shooting, they're going to be able to look inside. I think that this is going to be a sloppy game with a lot of turnovers as well with the way that Florida National plays. So did set a total of 149. Do think that Florida Gulf Coast goes back to their solar roots a little bit. So in on the under, and I'm in on Florida International on the money line. 306.511, 306.512. Radford is going to be playing us at Southern Miss. Southern Miss is an underdog of 2.5 points, 151 to 151.5 is the total. Did set a total here of a 156.5. I do like the over. For Southern Miss, they've just played a lot of different styles over the last few seasons. Getting out of the business of Andre Cabello, I think, is actually a very good thing for them. But I mean, it's a Southern Miss team that right now, in terms of total possessions per game, have slowed themselves all the way down to 312th in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, with Radford bringing in Zach Chu, he was a game manager over with the Indiana Pacers, much like a lot of these NBA guys. He's got this team running and gunning. They are right now 43rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I'm going to be in on the overhand. I do think that Radford should be closer to a 4.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay it, because even though this team has had a little bit of a rough result here to begin the season, this team does have quite a bit of versatility. I do think that their current 30.8% 3-point shooting going to be going northward. You got Del Jones, who comes on over from Clemson, and Dennis Parker Jr. from NC State. These two guys from the ACC have been able to combine for about 33 points per game. You've had Jones be that main facilitator with about 3.5 assists per game. Radford turned the ball over darn near 13 times per game, but they're not facing a defense that is really going to be batting down the hatches in terms of generating a lot of turnovers. And for Southern Miss, they themselves have been a very interesting team in the way that they've hit the glass over the last few seasons. seasons this year. They've done a nice job in terms of being a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so they've been able to do a nice job there with Isaac Tavares and along with Willick Weeks be able to combine for about 36 points per game between the two of them, 13 boards and 3.8 turnovers per game. As for Southern Miss, this has been a unit that they themselves have been able to protect the ball much better than under Andre Cabello. They've been turning the ball over about 11.5 times per game. There are real weaknesses on the outside. They're allowing teams to shoot 37% from three-point range, but Kurt Lewis, a former very highly touted junior college guy, only gave you about 6 points per game. You need a little bit more there. Daji Benoit, he comes over from the SWAC, 7.5 points, 4.5 boards. You're going to need a little bit more rebounding there, and I do think that Radford is going to be able to clean up their act a little bit more with regards to turnovers and take advantage of a Southern Miss team that, once again this year, having a tough time guarding the perimeter. So Radford is a 4.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number and like the over. Semi-total 156.5, 36.5-13, 36.5-14. Drexel is on the road against American. American is an American-sized favorite as they are 4.5 points. 139.5 is a total line with American. I did set them as a 1-point underdog. I do like Drexel right on the money line. Now for Drexel, they are currently outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but so is American, and this is an American squad that I think is going to get absolutely dump trucked on the glass. You've got a Drexel team that's a top 80 team in terms of rebound percentage. American is well outside the top 250 as American is looking to replace Mark Rogers from his season ago. Matt Mayock has good versatility. He stays right around 6'7", 8.5 points, about 4 boards per contest, but your lone two guys that give you over 4.9 rebounds per game, Julian Etibri along with Carson McDonald, they both give you between 5 and 5.2 rebounds per game, about 7.5 points per game out of both of these guys, but American uncharacteristically really sped themselves up this season. Currently they're honored 12th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but it's very clear that they're looking to get back to their roots. In the last 3 games, they have played at a pace of about 5 possessions fewer than their first 6 games of the season, and mainly it's because they're turning the ball over a lot. They're outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. They've been turning the ball over 13 times per game. Drexel, they've had some turnover woes themselves. They're outside the top 250 with regards to their own ball security, and for Drexel, they've seen a fall off with their 3-point shooting percentage, but they've been a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound, headlined by Shane Blakeney, who's been able to give 12.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. You've got Willem Garcia Adston, who's been able to give you about 7 boards, 7 points per game, so he's done a nice job hitting the offensive glass for this team. And then you've got Kevin Vanderhorst, who's been able to give you about 10 points. He's shooting in the mid-30s from 3. It's been a nice mix and match sort of unit for Drexel. Drexel still not doing a great job in terms of generating turnovers, but they just play good in-your-face sort of defense, and I do think that they're going to pester American and win from within. I did set a low total here of a 132. Drexel back about 285th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so like the under and Drexel on the money line. 3 is 6-5-15, 3 is 6-5-16. Austin Peay is going to be on the road facing off against Kent State. Kent State is an 8.5 to a 9.5 point favor. 156.5 to a 157 is the total. I set a total here of a 146. I like the under. Austin Peay, a very mid-tempo team, about 180th in terms of total possessions per game. Kent State has exploded to being a top 15 team with regards to total possessions per game. I'm still of the belief that Kent State is going to be getting back to their roots, play a little bit more slow and controlled, and both of these teams have been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers. Austin Peay 52nd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis and games played away from home. Kent State about a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Kent State is shooting 39% from 3 after last year. They were outside the top 10 with this regard. Now they are a different team with Morgan Stafford finally healthy after last year. He dealt with injury. He's been able to shoot about 43% from 3-point range, supplying the team with about 16.5 points per game, but I do think that that's going to be going downward a little bit. You've got Jari Williamson along with Sion Medley, both shooting about 41% from 3, and Medley, he's one of the more underrated facilitators in all of college basketball. 6.5 assists per game to go along with his 11.5 points per game. Going to be a little bit tough for Austin Peay down low against Jareko Gillespie, who, if I'm not mistaken, he's leading the country in terms of rebounds. 12.8 rebounds, block and a half, 19.5 points per game. So he's been able to do a nice job, and that's been able to give Kent State quite a few second and third chances, but it's an Austin Peay team that they've been able to do a nice job themselves in terms of being able to just defend down low. They're a top 200 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They have a lot of teams who shoot less than 30% from 3. I think there might be a little bit of regression there, but then again, Kent State needs to experience a little bit of regression with their own 3-point shooting, and for this Austin Peay team, you've had Tate McCubbin do a really nice job, supply 13 points per game. He's got about 6'7" size, shooting 36% from 3-point range. Anton Brookshire, he's a guard that holds over from a season ago. He's been able to give the team 7 points per game, and after it was a little bit of rough going to begin the season on the glass, Rashad Marshall, who comes over from Arkansas State, he's been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game, with Colin Parker, the gentleman that comes over from the non-D1 ranks, give you 15 points per game to headline things. I do think that Austin Peay SP, a team that's currently in the top 60 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, gets things slowed down, and they stay in this game. Semi-line at 8. I'm willing to take 8.5 plus with SP. Made it 12-146. I'm in on the under. 3-6-5-17, 3-6-5-18. Coastal Carolina, they are on the road facing off against USC Upstate. USC Upstate is between a 1-point favorite to a 1.5-point underdog. So on this game, it is 145.5, and I say USC Upstate as a 1.5-point favorite. So as a money line underdog / laying a point, I'm willing to take a shot here on USC Upstate. It's an Upstate team that's been able to turn over a nice new leaf this season after they were so bad defensively 8 seasons ago. Not necessarily that they're going to knock your socks off in so many different ways, but right now they become a top 175 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are a top 175 team in terms of generating turnovers, and they've been more respectable on the glass. Still outside the top 200 with that regard, but you've been able to get some good production out of Jeffith Martinez, who's been able to give you about 5.5 boards, 2 blocks, 5 points per game, and then you've got a lot of holdover guards from a season ago. Carmelo Adkins, Kamari Gregory. These two guys are both giving between 14 to 15 points per game. With Adkins, he's shooting 44% from 3-point range, and on the other side of things, you've got a Coastal Carolina team that is looking to bump up their tempo from a season ago. Last year, outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. This year, they're inside the top 175, and USC Upstate, after they played very up-tempo last year, they're now outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. So dueling tempos here. You've got AJ Chancellor along with Joshua Beadle be able to combine for about 29 points per game, and with Beadle, he actually saw some meaningful minutes out there in the ACC last year. He's shooting 37.5% from 3. Rashid Jones, he's really your main holdover from a season ago, giving the team 5 boards, 3 assists, 13.5 points per game, and he's been able to shoot it well from 3-point range. This Coastal Carolina team, after they had no Ammon Alser down low last season, they've experienced a little bit of drop-off there. Jerry Ngokpat, who comes over from the Sun Belt, he's been able to give the team about 4.5 boards per contest, but for Coastal Carolina, they're still doing a nice job not allowing a lot of second and third chances. Top 100 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage, but in the end, I do think that USC Upstate just has a little bit more in the backcourt. Coastal Carolina outside the top 330 in terms of generating turnovers, so set Upstate as a 1.5-point favorite, 1 to lay up to 1 with them. And then I did set a total here of a 151.5. Here, the 145.5. I do like the over. 3-6-5-19, 3-6-5-20. Stone Cold, Stephen F. Austin plays SUT Grand Valley. The Vaqueros are a 5.5-point underdog to this game. It's 149 to 149.5. And with Stephen F. Austin made them a 5.5-point favorite, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a completely new Stephen F. Austin team from what they have been in the past, because Stephen F. Austin, when you think of them, you think of a team that is going to generate a whole bunch of turnovers and everything like that. Not so much a case this season. They've been outside the top 125 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're just really limiting threes. They've been a top 20 team in terms of lowest percentage of shots by an opponent that come from 3-point range, and they themselves have done a good job with their 3-point shooting percentage. Keon Thompson, he's one of the main guys that returned from a season ago. 18 points, 6.5 boards, 4 assists. He's right now shooting about 32% from 3, but he's getting the ball to Cam Burton, who's shooting 43% from 3 with 7.5 points per game. Narit Chikakonvek, he's been able to give you about 12.5 points, shooting 43% from 3. I told you guess on that last name if you couldn't tell, but Jared Colonel down low has actually been able to get the team nearly 4 blocks per contest, top 5 shot blocker in all of college basketball, and Stephen F. Austin has become a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage as well. Meanwhile, you've got a Grand Valley team that it just feels like it's been a little bit all over the place for them. It's a Grand Valley team that is going to be looking to push a little bit of tempo, but they're not necessarily going to be a team that plays at warp speed or anything like that. Right now, with Grand Valley about 136th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, they themselves have been experiencing a little bit of a tempo shift as well, slowing down to more around about 251st in terms of total possessions per game, but I could see this being a game where you get a lot of open 3-point looks for Stephen F. Austin against a UT Rio Grande Valley team that right now they're outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. This squad has also been one that has been just not really generating a lot of turnovers as well, so I do think that you get a relatively clean game, and for this Grand Valley team, they've been outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. That's a big reason why I'm willing to lay the number, but you've had Marvin McGee along Corey Cotton be really nice transfers, combined for 24.5 points per game. They're combined to shoot over 41% from 3 between the two of them, and for this Grand Valley team, right now they're shooting 43% from 3-point range. I just can't see that being a mainstay. They've added some nice 3-point shooters. Say Blake, a few seasons ago over at UW Green Bay, was like a 44% 3-point shooter. You've got Phil Barakovin. He's been a 6'6", a little bit of a combo guy. Comes on over from overseas. He's been able to give you 10.5 points. 57% three-point shooting, though. I'm just not quite sure about that. And then Always Right, that's his actual name, comes over from Rhode Island. He's been able to give you a little bit of facilitation with about 2.5 assists per game. But in the end, I do think that Stephen F. Austin pulls it out. And I do think that both of these teams start to go a little bit more up-tempo as well. So I set my total 151.5. I do like the over-end with Stephen F. Austin. Set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm seeing a few fives out there. If I'm between a 5 to a 6, I would rather lay 5 rather than take 6, but willing to lay up to 5 with Stephen F. Austin, and I'm going to be in on the over. 386-521, 386-522. Loyola Maryland is on the road against Hampton, and Hampton is a 5.5 point favorite. Total on scheme 140.5, and set my line at 3. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Loyola Maryland. Wasn't necessarily the greatest offensive showing against Coppin State, but offense does seem to be getting kicked up a little bit more, and you've got a Hampton team that's really been slowing down. Hampton is right now outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game and points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, the backcourt for Loyola Maryland has been headlined by Jacob Tadusu, doing it all, giving the team 16.5 points, 2.5 steals, 4 assists. He's not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but that's why you've got Emmett Adir right now shooting about 40% from three-point. He's been able to give the team 14 points per game now. He dealt with a little bit of injury to begin the season, but he's been able to return over the last 4 games, and he's been able to give the team a nice shot in the arm. Additionally, for Loyola Maryland, you lose the Elich brothers, so they haven't been quite as dominant down low. Right now, Adir is the only guy in the roster that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game, but even with not having as much down low, this has still been a team that hasn't been allowing a lot of second and third chances as well, and they've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. And for Hampton, this is very much a team based a little bit more down low because guard play has just been a little bit suspect for them. Jaquil Gaines-White, who comes over from Oakland State, has been able to give you about 8.5 points per game. Xavier Long is one of the main holdovers from season ago, and at 6'7", he's been able to do a nice job with his versatility. 10.5 points, 11 boards, 2.5 assists, steal and a half per contest. But this is a unit that's right now shooting 29.5% for 3, even with Daniel Johnson shooting about 40% for 3 with 11 points per game. Michael Ely, who had a nice year a few seasons ago over at Siena, just has always dealt with injuries, and he's been very inconsistent with regards to his overall shot. It's a Hampton team that has been a top 57 team with regards to percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they're allowing opponents to grab a lot of second and third chances as well. Hampton, top 125 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but having a little bit of tough time being able to guard from beyond the arc. You've got a Loyola Maryland team that's relatively mid-tempo, so I do think that the scoring going to be a little bit more muted in this one. I do think that you get to late game following in. I do think that for Hampton, they do just enough to get the job done outright, but I could only set them as a 3-point favorite, so set a total of 141, 140.5 is my max buy point on the over, but a buy point on the over to go along the points with Loyola Maryland. 306-523, 306-524. Got Presbyterian on the road against Wofford. Wofford is a 5.5 point favorite. Totals between 139 to 139.5, and I set a total of 132.5. I'm in on the under. Wofford's been cranking up their tempo ever since Kevin Gillett took over as the new coach, but you got a Presbyterian team that out of 365 Division I teams, they are 364th in terms of total possessions per game. The team is playing very slowly. They're looking to play a lot more through the post and through their big men, as you've got a pair of guys in Jalen Peterson, great name, and Joda Pierce, who have been able to combine for 15 rebounds per game. Carl Parrish in the backcourt has been able to give the team about 13.5 points per game. He's shooting 37.5% from 3, but Presbyterian as a whole, they're only shooting 29.1% from the outside. They've been outside the top 300 in terms of ball security as well, but they've been a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage as well, doing a much better job down low rather than from the perimeter. And on the flip side of things, you do have a Wofford team that's geared a little bit more towards the backcourt, as you've got a guy, Niles Melchowski. He comes over from Central Florida. He's done a nice job giving the team 12 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists. Good versatility there for a Wofford team that they've had a tough time being able to guard the arc themselves. They're shooting about 32.5% from 3, while they're allowing opponents to shoot 35.5% from 3, but Wofford does have a positive rebound differential. Not a team that's going to force the issue whatsoever. They're outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but you've got Kamari Holmes, who's been getting at Holmes with about 19 points, 2 assists, 2 steals, 5.5 boards, shooting over 44% from 3-point range. Caden Vasco, who comes over from Central Michigan, it's been a little bit of disappointment. He's only been able to give the team 6 points per game. He was a good 3-point shooter over at Central Michigan. Right now, he's shooting only 18% from 3. I think that that's due him for a little bit of positivity. I think that this is going to be a very slow and controlled game between a pair of teams that have been hit or miss with regards to their offense, but in the end, I do think that this Wofford team does find a way to persevere. I do think that Wofford is right now finding a little bit more down low with Brian Sumter, Luke Flynn being able to both give you between 5.8 to 5.9 rebounds per game. So I did set a line here of an 8.5 10.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Wofford and in on the under semi-total 132.5. 306.525, 306.526. You've got High Point, hoping to not be a low point as they play out to Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois is a 10.5 point underdog. 160.5 to 161 is the total line. Set a line at 6. I do like the points here with Southern Illinois. Now, Southern Illinois is not going to be some sort of a great 3-point shooting team or anything like that, but right now they're shooting below 25.5% from 3-point range this season. I do think that is going to be trending northward as the season goes along, as it's a squad that has Karan House, who comes over from Jacksonville State, doing a nice job being the head of the snake with 15.5 points, 2.5 assists. He's shooting 31.5% from 3, which, and sadly, that's one of the better percentages that you're going to find on the team, but you've got Aljibi squared and Rollins Aljibi along with Prince Aljibi, who have both been able to combine for about 11.5 rebounds per game for the Southern Illinois team. They are looking to crank up the tempo a little bit more, back in the top 100 with regards to total possessions per game, and they've been a pretty good team down low with regards to their defense. Top 150 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and their own 2-point shooting percentage has been in the top 75. It's very clear that they're looking to drive the ball into the painted area. Meanwhile, for High Point, they, over the last few seasons, were actually a very low-tempo team. We saw the changeover in the offseason as you've got Flynn Cameron coming in as a new coach. He was the assistant a season ago, and he's got the team playing a little bit more mid-tempo, about 153rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're back in the top 35 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, as you've been able to get 19 points per game out of Cameron Fletcher, guy that when he was at his full height of his powers over at Xavier and Florida State was a starter at the Power Conference level. He's right now shooting 37.5% from 3, and this is just a High Point team that year in and year out, they just don't hurt themselves. Right now, they're only turning the ball over 9.5 times per game, top 25 team in terms of ball security. You've got a lot of different weapons with Chase Johnson shooting 44% from 3. He's able to give the team 9 points per contest. You've had Scary Terry Anderson come on over from the Southland. He's giving you 12 points per game. It's not a team that's going to reel in a lot of second and third chances. Jocelyn Bodu being out of the fold has hurt them, but it's a High Point team as well. It's been a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I do think that Southern Illinois get to do a little bit better job in terms of protecting the ball. It's a Southern Illinois team that right now is turning the ball over about 11.5 times per game. Neither great nor terrible, but I do think that 3-point shooting percentage, it starts to go a little bit northward. High Point, again, not necessarily the most up-tempo team. I do think that limits the scoring a little bit here, so I set my total at 154. I'm in on the under and the points with Southern Illinois. 36.527, 36.528. Ohio plays host to Maine. Maine hopes to not get Maine. That's a 10.5 point underdog. So it's game between 137.5 to 138. I am going to be in on the under. I set my total 136.5. Maine has outbroken 65 points in a game this season. That's not great, to say the least. So Maine defense has not been bad, and Maine, as per usual, they are playing super slow and controlled. They're outside the top 290 in terms of total possessions per game. You've got an Ohio team that last year they pushed quite a bit of tempo. They're more mid-tempo this year, about 175th in terms of total possessions per game. But for this Maine team, man, they lose their backcourt from season ago where they were doing such a great job of generating turnovers, and, well, now they're just turning the ball over themselves. 14.5 turnovers per game. They're outside the top 320 in terms of ball security. TJ Beal, who comes on over from Southeast Missouri State, he's been pretty solid. He's done a nice job. Give the team 12.5 points, 5 boards, and he is a lone guy on the roster that's giving you over 5 boards, and he's a lone guy that's giving you more than 9 points per game. You've got the other flag brother, an ace flag, the brother Cooper flag, right now only giving you about 5 points, 5 rebounds per game. You need a little bit more out of him. Team as a whole shooting about 31% for 3, and they're running you off the 3-point line. They're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% for 3, but they're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they have been getting blasted on the glass. They're outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage. You do have an Ohio team that has been very suspect with regards to their defense. They're right now outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're allowing teams to shoot 40% for 3. They're outside the top 340 for the second straight year in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and this has been a unit that they themselves have been outside the top 255 in terms of their overall rebound percentage. So you could see a little bit of sloppier game. Aiden Hadaway has been able to give you 14 points, 6.5 boards. He's not shot it well from 3, but Jackson Pavletsky, main point guard from the season ago, 4 assists, 2.5 turnovers, 41% 3-point shooter, 18 points per game. He's been rock solid, but Dior Connors, who last year shot 40% from 3 over at Appalachian State, he's shooting just 24% from 3. Jalen Breath, who was a nice rebounder over at UNC Greensboro last season, he's been in and out of the lineup. Could see him back out once again here, and Elijah Elliott is out with injury as well. But even with that, I do think that Ohio is going to do a nice job limiting a main offense that, man, it's been one of the most grody in all of college basketball. I set my line at 10.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with Ohio. This was actually an opening number of 9, and with regards to the total, in on the underside, I told 136.5. 306.529, 306.530. Lamar plays host to Louisiana. Louisiana does find themselves as a 9.5 point underdog total on this game. It is 127.5. I set a total of a 130. 32. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over. It's a Louisiana team that they were limited to fewer than 60 points against Jackson State a few days ago. It's not great. They're outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that Lamar might be able to do their part with this total, as you do have pair of teams that are not necessarily pushing tempo right now. With regards to Louisiana, total possessions per game 346 in all of college basketball. Lamar, they're more of a mid-tempo team, about 198th in the country. And for this Louisiana team, the big thing has been Jamarian Keller, the transfer from Oklahoma State, who had 34 points in the team's first 2 games. He has been out ever since those first 2 games. And Joshua Lewis, a top 75 freshman, just not blossomed in the backcourt, only about 6.5 points per game. Dorian Finster, Jackson Oliveira, these 2 guys have transferred in. They've combined for about 23 points, 9 rebounds per game, but you just don't have a point guard with having Keller currently out of the fold, and that's a big reason why I'm going to be willing to lay it with Lamar. I did sell Lamar as more of a 10.5 point favorite with this Lamar group. You've got a 6'10" versatile piece in Andrew Holyfield, 15 points, 6 boards, and he's right now shooting about 39.5% from 3. Lamar's Olds only shooting about 32.5% from the outside. They're one of the worst teams in all of college basketball getting to the free throw line. Not a bad thing because they're only shooting 64.5% at the charity stripe, but his team is dominating on the boards. They're a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots. That result in an offensive rebound as Corey Penbaker, he's back from season ago, 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Love what he's able to do. And this team has been really facilitating by committee. Right now for this Lamar team, you've got essentially 6 different guys who are doling out at least 2 assists per game. They've been dealing with Brian Knight currently being out of the fold. He was a nice holdover from a season ago. But Ariel White, he's done a nice job giving the team right around about 5 boards. He's been able to throw in there a few assists per game at 6'7". Nice versatility. The sharing is carrying for Lamar, and they go up against a Louisiana team that is not generating a lot of turnovers. Lamar themselves, top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that you get a little bit more scoring with Lamar turning those turnovers into offense. Set at 12-132. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 10 with Lamar. 36-5-31, 36-5-32. Gardner Webb is going to be on the road facing up against Queens NC, and Queens NC is a 12 to a 12.5 point favorite. 161.5 is the total line. With Gardner Webb, I did set them as an underdog of 16.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Queens NC. Gardner Webb is outside the top 340 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're getting dump trucked on the glass. They're losing the turnover battle. It's all sorts of bad right now for this team, and on the flip side, you do have a Queens NC team that's a top 100 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. As per usual, they're shooting it relatively well from 3-point, shooting about 36% from the 3-point line. You've got Yoel Verman, who's been able to give you 13.5 points. He's right now only shooting about 26.5% from 3, but it's improving game by game. Avante Parker, who was a nice rebounder over at Georgia Southern a few seasons ago, only about 4 boards per contest, but he's been able to supply 9.5 points per game. You've been able to have Gus Larson as a true 7-footer come over from Cal. He's been able to give you darn near a block, a few rebounds, so he's been solid. And then Nasir Man has been the man, 14.5 points, 6 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point. It's a Queens NC team that's not the same shot blocking team that they were a season ago, and this is a Queens team that has been outside the top 300 in terms of the percentage of missed shots by an opponent that result in an offensive rebound. Got a Gardner Webb team that has been really rough on the glass themselves. They're outside the top 300 with this regard, as you've had Jacob Hogreth be able to give you 9 points, 7 rebounds per game. He's one of 2 guys on the roster that give you more than 2.6 rebounds per game. That is not great. Spence Sims, Jacob Hudson in the backcourt have been able to combine for about 20 points per game, and Sims is shooting 46.5% from 3. Team as a whole shoots 31.5% from 3. They're outside the top 320 in terms of ball security. They're outside the top 250 in terms of creating turnovers. It's just not great for Gardner Webb, and it's a Gardner Webb team that has lost all their games by at least 8 points, with the 8-point loss coming against Old Southeast Louisiana. I do think that Queens is going to be able to take it out here, and Gardner Webb is now in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. They're cranking that up. Queens NC a little bit more mid-tempo, but I think that they take out their frustrations here on Gardner Webb. Set a total of a 164.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 16 with Queens. 36-5-30, 33-65-34. Navy's on the road against Delaware State. Delaware State is an 11.5 to a 12.5 point dog. 141.5 is the total, and for Navy, I made them a 13-point favorite. Going to be willing to lay the number. It's been a mixed bag of results for Navy. They hold in there against North Carolina, but then they get completely blown out by Yale at home. So it's been a little bit up-down all around for the team, but the leadership should lead them past the Delaware State team that has replaced darn near everything from a season ago. It's a Navy unit that has had good backcourt play in Jinwoo Kim and Asim Benjini, combining for about 30 points per game. And both are shooting over 38.5% from 3-point. Down low, Don Draper, no relation to Madman. He's been able to give you you 7 points, 7 boards. He's been rock solid there with a pair of steals per game. And additionally, you've got Aiden Kayoe. He's got some good muscle down low at 6'10", 12 points, 8 boards. He should be able to win that battle down low against a Delaware State team that last season they were pretty sturdy on the glass, but they do lose those guys like Olsen, Andrew, and company. So now you've got the Ponce James in the backcourt alongside Zion Bethea, who've been able to combine for about 23 points per game. Both guys are shooting less than 30% from three. Delaware State is shooting its collective 29% from three, and they've been a bottom 25 team in terms of guarding the three-point line. The squad, to their credit, they're not allowing a lot of second and third chances. Top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. This is despite the fact that you've only got one guy, Miles Webb, who's giving you over 5 rebounds per game. He's at 5.2 boards and stands about 6'8", comes in from St. Francis, Pennsylvania. So don't know how long lasting that's going to be. But that said, this is also a Delaware State team that is a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, despite the fact that they are a top 20 team in terms of percentage of the shots that come from 2-point range. And I just don't know what they're going to be able to provide offensively, as Delaware State typically a little bit more of an up-tempo team. They've throttled that back a little bit with losing so many guys from a season ago, 328th in terms of total possessions per game. So circumstance where I set my line at 13, I'm going to be one away with Navy, and I'm going to be in on this total under as well, as I set my total at a 139, 3-6-5, 35, 3-6-5, 36. Central Connecticut is on the road against Seton Hall, and Seton Hall does find themselves as a 16.5 point favorite. It's on this game between 132.5 to 133, and did set a total of a 136.5. I do like the over. Now for Seton Hall, this squad has been outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, but we really saw them fire on all cylinders with their offense in Maui. Now, the Maui rims are obviously very, very generous and everything, but that said, with the Seton Hall squad, I really do like what I'm seeing out of Adam Clark. He comes over from Merrimack, and he's been able to do a nice job being a two-it-all guy and really doling out good, clean offense. He's been able to give the team 5 assists per game. The team is only turning the ball over about 10 times per game, so even though they're not playing up-tempo, they're doing a nice job of being able to keep their possessions clean. This has been a top 125 team in terms of their rebound percentage as well, with having A.J. Stanton McRae be able to give you about 4 boards, 14 points per game. He's shooting over 40% from 3. It is a Seton Hall team that, as a whole, they shoot about 33% from the outside, but I do think that Central Connecticut going to be a hold in there. I did set them as a underdog of 14.5 points. We've already seen them win on the road against Rutgers and Boston College. Now, recognize that neither of those teams are necessarily super duper amazing, but you know, with Central Connecticut, Darren Smith Jr., he's shooting about 38% from 3, 20.5 points per game. Central Connecticut is shooting 39.5% from 3. They keep their possessions clean, outside the top 2 in terms of total possessions per game, but only 10 turnovers per contest. They've been a top 75 team with regards to rebound percentage as well, and with the Central Connecticut team, they are going to be a little bit vulnerable from the outside, but again, they were a top 125 team with regards to their overall defensive efficiency a season ago. Their line teams to shoot 30.5% from 3. They've been a little bit better with their 2-point shooting defense, but in the end, I do think both of these teams going to be able to make some threes. You've got a Central Connecticut team that, by the way, over 5 blocks per game. It's not necessarily even one guy. You've got Max Frazier giving you a block and a half per contest, Nico Ashley a block and a half per contest. You've had Jay Rogers do a nice job being able to give you good, clean offense with 6.5 assists to 1.3 turnovers per game. I think that things are just sufficient enough for the over, so like the over in that 15 plus, we'll take those points with Central Connecticut. 36-5, 37, 36-5, 38. James Madison plays us NC Central. NC Central, a 15.5 point underdog, 151.5 is the total, and for NC Central, set them as an 18.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay with James Madison. Now, James Madison has had some letdowns in second halves. We've seen them get off to some really nice starts and then just sort of peter out late, but now you've got an NC Central team that's outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, James Madison is shooting 37.5% from 3. I think that there's going to be a little bit of regression there for James Madison. Still outside the top 2 in terms of total possessions per game, but they're also outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I think that we see a lot of improvement with that defense, even though they're not necessarily a team that generates a lot of turnovers. They're only generating about 10 per contest. NC Central last year, a top 30 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they have not been the same this year, and they're going to have a tough time in the backcourt guarding against Brady Douglas, who comes over from Georgia Southern. He's been able to give the team 14.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. He and Cliff Davis both shoot about 35.5% for 3 as Davis off the ball scorer, steal 12 points per game, and then Justin McBride down low, about 5 rebounds per game. And Eddie Ricks, who's been in the Preston Spradlin system since these two were over at Morehead State, has been able to give you 7 rebounds per game. And with this NC Central team, it is very suspect as to what you're going to be able to get down low out of this team, as they've done a nice job over the last few seasons in terms of grabbing offensive rebounds, but they're back outside the top 3 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're allowing teams to shoot 36.5% for 3. Still top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but not quite the same with losing so many of the backcourt pieces that were so good for them a season ago. And you've had Gage Lattimore do it all for this team. 2.5 assists, 3.5 boards, 20 points per game. He's right now shooting darn near 50% from 3-point range, but he needs a little bit of help, and you don't have a single guy outside of Corey Carvey who's been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game, giving you more than 5 rebounds per game, and with this NC Central team, they're outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. So I do think that James Madison finds a way to go out there, get the job done. With NC Central, we've seen them play various amount of different styles over the last few seasons. They've really throttled it down to our 82nd in terms of total possessions per game. So do think that things are going to be a bit more slow and controlled in this game. So I might total 140.5. I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with James Madison. 36-5, 39, 36-5, 40. Akron is playing us to Bucknell. The bracket Boston Bison are an underdog of 21.5 points. 160.5 to 161.5 is the total, and set Bucknell is a 17.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, this is an Akron team that's a top 45 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they've been absolutely bombing it from 3. They're shooting about 39% from 3-point range, as Tavari Johnson and Shema Scott in the backcourt have been tremendous. Scott has been able to shoot 43% from 3, 14 points, 3.5 assists per game. You got Johnson give you 5.5 assists, 18 points per contest, and for Akron, they really started to speed up their tempo last year. They're playing fast, but they're not playing overly fast this year, about 80th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Bucknell's looking to slow things down. They're about 243rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that Bucknell has a chance to be able to hold in there down low. That's why I took the points with this squad in Akron. You've got Amani Lyles, who's been able to give you about 6 boards, 14.5 points per game. But for Akron, they have been outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so there are going to be second and third chances to be had for the 6'10" freshman that comes over from Germany, and Amon Doris, who's been able to give you about 14.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. It's a Bucknell team that they themselves have been a top 225 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, have to do a better job down low. They're outside the top 325 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, and I'm figuring that we're going to see a little bit of positivity to the fact that Bucknell's allowing teams to shoot 41.2% from 3-point range. You go back a season ago, and I recognize that they've lost a lot of guys from a season ago, but I think they were allowing teams to shoot closer to about 34.5% from 3-point range. And when it comes to Brandon McCreesh, he's been able to supply the team with about 7.5 points, shooting 37.5% from 3. It is a Bucknell team that does need to clean up the turnovers. They've been outside the top 3 in terms of ball security, but they themselves have been a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that the dead possessions are going to be causing for a little bit of an under, while you've got an Akron team that they themselves have been pretty solid in terms of taking care of the ball. Akron, for as fast as they go, only about 10.5 turnovers per game, but in the end, I do think that Bucknell does a pretty solid job inside of holding up there. That allows them to cover this number, semi-total 157.5, like the under and the points with Bucknell. 306-541, 306-542. West Virginia plays us to Coppin State. Coppin State is a very sizable underdog here. You're going to be catching them between 31 to 31.5 points to this game. It is 133, and I'm going to be willing to take a shot on that under. I did set my line here at a 128.5, and with Coppin State, last year they were 363rd in all of college basketball in terms of points on a per possession basis. This year they've been a little bit better, but they're still well outside the top 320 with that regard. You've got a Coppin State team that's currently shooting less than 30.5% from 3-point range, as you've had Demontre Hall be able to give you 10 points per game, and he's a lone guy that's right now giving you double figures. Khalil Horton has actually shot about 43.5% from 3, so he's heard a who from 3-point range, but Coppin State outside the top 350 in terms of ball security. This is a unit that as well has been just really getting bludgeoned on the glass, or outside the top 3 in terms of rebound percentage, or outside the top 3 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. And now you go up against West Virginia team that's been a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game. They're playing nice and slow, that Russ Hodge style that comes over from North Texas, and he brought with him a pair of friends, Jasper Floyd, who's been a do-it-all guy. He was over at North Texas last year, and right now he's given the team 9 points, 3 steals, 4 assists, and he's actually shot 50% from 3. And then Brennan Lorient, he is a big man that's been able to give you 11 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. West Virginia not really giving themselves a lot of second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they're also a top 25 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, or a top 10 team in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. They've been allowing teams to shoot 37% from 3, but you've got a Coppin State team that really doesn't bomb it from 3. They've been a top 100 team in terms of generating turnovers. This is a Coppin State team that's right now one of the most, frankly, sorry teams in all of college basketball. I think that West Virginia just really suffocates Coppin State and doesn't allow them a whole lot of scoring opportunities. So set my line at 32.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 32 with West Virginia, and on the under side, my total 128.5. 306-543, 306-544. Louisiana Monroe plays us to Mississippi Valley State. The Devils are an 11.5 to a 12-point dog. Total on this game between 151.5 to a 152.5. Set Monroe as a 12.5 point favorite. So 12 is the absolute max I'm willing to lay, and hey, an actual respectable line for a Mississippi Valley State game. You haven't seen too many of those in recent years, and for Mississippi Valley State, they are getting a little bit better. They're still outside the top 280 in terms of points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and I think that they're going to have a tough time matching up with Matavius Russell. Mississippi State transfer has been able to shoot 43% from three, 16.5 points. He's been able to do a rock solid job there, but it's not a team that's going to be completely blown out on the last as Monroe. They're outside the top 3 in terms of their rebound percentage. They're allowing teams to grab 13 offensive rebounds per game. That's been a little bit of a rough mark, and for Monroe, they're about 300th of the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, Monroe has been a top 225 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but leaving something to be desired in the post as the lone guy that's giving you over 4 rebounds per game. That'd be Lavelle Brodno, who's been able to give you 6.5 boards, 10.5 points per game. Now for the Delta Devils, the sloppiness with the ball is, I think, going to be very costly to them. They're still turning the ball over 17 times per game. They're a bottom 5 team in terms of ball security, but Michael James has been a baller. 38% 3-point shooter, 20.5 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists, and then Daniel Mayfield has a chance to be able to hold up down low. 7 boards, 14 points per game. He's just really the lone guy other than Xavion Barnett, who's been able to give you more than 4.5 rebounds per game, and Barnett has only played in 2 games. He's been dealing with injury all season long, so that's a little bit of an issue. I do think that the Delta Devils are going to be very much costed by the turnovers, and for Mississippi Valley State, they have been cranking up their tempo quite a bit. Last year, they were well outside the top 250 towards the total possessions per game. They are right now checking in more around about 33rd in the country towards the total possessions per game. You've got a Monroe team that they go to Phil Cunningham, the former Troy coach, and they've been experiencing a little bit of a tempo shift as well. They're more of a mid-tempo team at about 146 in terms of total possessions per game, but did set a total of a 144.5. I think that there's going to be so much sloppiness in this game that you get an under. So in on the under and willing to lay up to 12 here with Louisiana Monroe. 3-6-5-45, 3-6-5-46. Central Arkansas plays us a Little Rock. Little Rock is a 1.5 point underdog. So on this game, it is 140.5 to 141. And with Little Rock, I did set them as an underdog of 2 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Central Arkansas. Central Arkansas seems to be turning over a little bit of a new leaf. They're still playing fast, but not at warp speed, hovering in the neighborhood about 100th in terms of total possessions per game, and they get back their top scorer from a season ago in Cameron Hunter, who he was injured 2 years ago. Last year, just couldn't get out there on the floor for Wisconsin, but he's back to doing what he did many years ago. 15 points. He's been able to give the team about 2 assists per game. Javion Guy King missed all of last season. He's back giving the team 8 points, 2.5 assists per game, and you've got a lot of facilitation by committee for the team. Now, Central Arkansas still sloppy with the ball outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and the fact that they are outside the top 3 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage is not necessarily great either, but still, this has been a unit that has been much better on the glass. They're a top 55 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and Little Rock last year was a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're right now checking in outside the top 200. We have seen a massive fall there. This squad is shooting 39.5% from 3, which is big for them, but they're a low-tempo team that is right now outside the top 325 in terms of ball security. Turned the ball over darn near 17 times per game. Jonathan Lawson has been solid. He's been all around the block at a few power conference schools, 13 points, 4.5 assists, 2 steals, shooting about 34% for 3, and Braxton Bayless has been a great add. He's right now shooting 58% for 3, not sustainable, but he comes over from Western Kentucky, where last season he did shoot about 43.5% from 3 on his 8 points per game. Right now, he's supplying the team with 10 points per game, but that sloppiness with the ball, I think, is going to be costly. You've got Tunkon Gakic, who's been able to give you about 5 boards, 9.5 points per game for Little Rock. They're doing a nice job not allowing a lot of second and third chances. Top 175 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but also allowing teams to shoot over 40% from 3. I don't think that that's going to be maintaining throughout the entirety of this season, but Central Arkansas, they're a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3, and I do think that they get the job done. And what I think is going to be a mid-tempo game, semi-total 144. I like the over, and I do like Central Arkansas laying the point and a half. 3-6-5-47, 3-6-5-48. Georgetown plays us to UMBC. UMBC 16.5 to 17.5 point underdogs. 149.5 is the total line. It's at a total of a 149.5. So if we can get back down to that opener that was more around about 148, I'm going to be in on the over. But with Georgetown, I did set them as a 21.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. KJ Lewis has really impressed me. Comes over from Arizona, and he's been a really good 6'4", just do-it-all guy. 6 boards, 16 points, 3 assists, 2.5 steals. Only shooting about 32% from 3, but Caleb Williams shoots for about 42.5% from the outside, 12 points per game. The Mac attack, Malik Mack, 16 points, 4 assists. He's done a nice job leading this offense, and it's a Georgetown team that's been incredibly efficient with the ball. They're only turning the ball over about 9 times per game. That's a top 20 mark in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And then you got UMBC team that over the last few seasons, they've been one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. We have noticed them really really throttling back this season, though. They're outside the top 200 right now in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, it's a Georgetown team that ever since Ed Cooley has taken over, relatively mid-tempo, about 187th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But for this UMBC team, I think that they're going to have a tough time against the size of some like a 7-footer and Vincent Iwuchukwu, who's only been able to give you about 4 boards per contest, and he's out with a little bit of an injury. But when he's been out there, he's been able to give you 12 points. If he can't go, you got Julius Hafana, who's a true 7-footer who comes over from New Zealand, who's been pretty rock solid there as well. And for this Maryland-Baltimore County team, you just don't necessarily have that size, so you do have a nice facilitator in Ace Valentine back from season ago. 9 points, 4.5 boards, 5 assists per game. Right now, Jaleel King, who's saying 6'2", is your lone guy, give you over 5 rebounds per game, 6 boards, 13 points per contest. DJ Armstrong has already hit 2 buzzer beaters. He's shooting 49% from 3. I think we're going to see a little bit of regression there, but still with this UMBC team, they are a squad that has been turning the ball over way too much outside the top 300 in terms of ball security. Line teams only shoot about 30% from 3-point range, but I do think the UMBC going to start to see a little bit more of a tempo shift. They've been trying to push teams off the 3-point line, but that size for Georgetown down low, I think it's going to be too much. I'm willing to lay with Georgetown, set them as 21.5-point favorite, and at a 149 or less, and on the over 3 of 6.549, 3 of 6.550. Alabama A&M is going to be playing us to Tennessee State, and Tennessee State is a 3.5-point road favorite total on this game. It is 142.5, and for Tennessee State, I can only set them as a 2-point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take the 3+ here with Alabama A&M. Tennessee State has actually done a great job on the glass. Going back to last year, a top 75 team with regards to rebound percentage. Problem is, they have no outside shooting whatsoever. They shoot 28.5% from 3, and they're outside the top 320 in terms of ball security with 15 turnovers per game. You've had Travis Harper do a nice job in the backcourt with about 16.5 points, 5.5 boards, but he only shoots about 31% from 3. Dante Harris, who has been all around the block. This guy was over at Memphis, Virginia, Georgetown. He's been able to give you about 14 points, 3.5 assists, so he's giving you a little bit of pop in the backcourt. But for this Tennessee State team, it's all about being able to hit the glass. They've been a top 50 team in terms of their rebound percentage, with having Carlos Williams being able to give you about 4.5 or so rebounds per game over the last 2 seasons. You bring in Khalil London to be able to help this team out as well. Began his career over at College of Charleston, where he didn't see a lot of minutes last year, but he's been able to give the team multiple assists, 7.5 points per game. But with Alabama A&M, I do think that they're going to be able to find their footing a little bit more as they had a coaching change in the offseason. They hire on the main man from Grambling over in Dante Jackson, and brought with them quite a few guys, including the top scorer in Kadavian Dozier, who's been able to give you 14 points per game. You've also got James Flippin and James Graham, who are a pair of forwards who have been able to combine for about 11 points per game. Graham has given you 4 boards per contest. It is an Alabama A&M team that has been outside the top 300 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, so not a lot of second or third chases to be had here, but still, this has been a team that has been able to hold up with regards to their 3-point shooting defense. Teams are shooting less than 32% from the outside against them, and you're going to have a classic tempo war. Tennessee State, 41st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Alabama A&M, 237th. I do think that Alabama A&M going to be able to hold up and in a nip and tuck spot if Tennessee State has to go to the free throw line. This is a squad that right now is shooting about 79% of the free throw line, so I do think that they can get the job done right on the money line, and I do think that that's going to help you out a little bit more with regards to the scoring in this game as well, because I do think that Tennessee State is going to be able to find a way to get second and third chances, but I do think that Alabama A&M is going to be able to bust through and be able to get to a Tennessee State team that has been rougher on the perimeter. So that total 152, I like the over, and a 3+ taking those points with Alabama A&M. 3 of 6.551, 3 of 6.552. Alcorn State is on the road against Iowa State. Iowa State a 40.5 to a 41.5 point favorite. So this game is between 150.5 to 151.5, and made my line 40.5. So 41+ is my buy point on Alcorn State. Jake Morton, who was the assistant over at Florida State last season, he got his first win, so yay verily for him. And it's an Alcorn State team that, I mean, they've got some relatively okay guards. They're shooting 36.5% for 3. Shane Lancaster has been able to shoot over 50% for 3 with about 11 points per game. This team is just going to be throwing like ragdolls down low. They don't have a single guy that's giving you over 4.4 rebounds per game, with Tyson McDaniels being able to give you 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. So that's a big giant problem. They're outside the top 350 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and Iowa State very good at generating turnovers, always a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And as a matter of fact, under TJ Altenberger, they've never been outside of the top 20 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And for Alcorn State, 17 turnovers per game. That's not great, but Iowa State is allowing teams to shoot 33% from 3. So I think that Alcorn State hits just enough threes to be able to hold within the 40.5 to 41. But still, this is an Iowa State team that's going to take it to them. Tamon Lipsby has been able to progress with his scoring now. Did miss a few games in their multi-team event. You do want to be noting that, but even without him, they were still able to win both of those games, and they were still able to generate a bunch of turnovers, as You've been noticing a lot more here out of Joshua Jefferson being a do-it-all guy. Right now, he's giving you 5 assists, 8 rebounds, 17.5 points at a steal and a half per contest at 6'8". He does it all. And then with Lipsby off the floor, you're seeing a little bit more out of Nate Heisey, who's been in the program for quite a while, comes over from Northern Iowa. He's only giving you about 5 points per game, but he doles out a pair of assists. He's giving you a steal, so he helps out. And Milami Masilovic, he's right now shooting 49% from three-point range. It's an Iowa State team that we've seen them play fast. We've seen them play slow. This is going to be probably somewhere between A and B this season right now, about 127th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Alcorn State, they're a mid-tempo team as well at about 158th, so circumstance where once you get past 40, I'm willing to take those points with Alcorn State. Did set a total here of a 148.5, so here at the 150 plus, I'm going to be in on the under 306.553, 306.554. Illinois State plays us Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky, a 13.5 point underdog. Total on this game, it is 155.5, and with Eastern Kentucky, set them as an 11.5 point underdog, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. Eastern Kentucky has taken a bit of a drop off with their defense. They're outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you still have a squad that does a pretty solid job in terms of just being able to grab second and third chances. Top 75 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, with Montavious Myrick being the main guy, 13 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, steal and a half per contest. This team is now outside the top 125 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so that's a little bit less than tremendous. But you've got Juan Cranford, who comes over from St. Francis, Pennsylvania, shooting 37% per three, 11 points per game. Turner Buttrey, who's a career mid-30s three-point shooter, is giving you 10.5 points. He's only shooting 19% from three. Do have to figure that there's going to be a little bit of positivity there. Big thing is this team needs to do a bit better with regards to their interior defense. They're outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Illinois State, a little bit disappointing to begin the season. Not a team that last year was really able to grab a lot of second and third chances despite having size, but they wouldn't allow their opponents to grab a lot of second and third chances. Back to doing that once again this year. Top 60 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with Chase Walker down low, give you about 12 points, 5.5 boards per game. And then the true 7-footer and Brandon Leib, he's only give you about 5 points per game, but 5.5 boards. He began his career over at Illinois. And Bowden Skunberg, who missed all of last season, he's been a positive at 10 points per game, shooting about 38% from three. You've got Johnny Kinzinger and Terry Coleman, who have been able to headline things with a combined 26 points, combined shoot about 38% from three. Need to be a little bit cautious of the fact that Illinois State only shooting about 67% of the free throw line. This is a Eastern Kentucky team that they do like to foul quite a bit. And for Eastern Kentucky, with their turnover woes, they've been outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, and they have been generating turnovers the same as they have in the past. They play an Illinois State team that's very much making it take it. Illinois State top 35 team in terms of ball security. They're outside the top 330 in terms of generating turnovers as well. So I think it's going to be a relatively straight up game there. And Eastern Kentucky, always a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. Illinois State, last year they were a very slow team. This year they're hovering more in the neighborhood about 221st in terms of total possessions per game. So I did set a total here of a 153.5, like the under and the points with Eastern Kentucky. 36.555, 36.566. New Orleans is on the road against Memphis. Memphis, a 16.5 to a 17.5 point favorite. And your total is 153.5, and I did set New Orleans as a 15.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Memphis. Their Achilles heel ever since Penny Hardaway has taken over as coach has always been turnovers, and it's a Memphis team that right now is turning the ball over darn near 14 times per game. They just haven't been able to find someone to pair with Doug McDaniel, who's been the lone guy on the roster, giving you over 8.5 points per game. He's right now generating 2 steals, 5.5 assists, 15 points per game, shooting 37% from three, but Memphis only shooting 32.5% from three is a little bit of a shocker. Julius Redford has come over. He's been able to give the team some versatility, 5.5 boards, 8.5 points per game. He was solid over at Western Kentucky last season, and you just see more out of Aaron Bradshaw, a former top 15 recruit that's only giving you 6 points per game. He is picking up 4 fouls per game. He's not really giving you a lot of rebounding, so that's a little bit of an issue. Now, Memphis, they're a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but it's also a Memphis team that's outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for this New Orleans team, they could be a little bit hit or miss in the backcourt, but you do have to like the fact that they brought in Jakevion Buckley and Colton Benson. Benson was a really nice sharpshooter over at Texas State a season ago, shooting 42% from three, 17 points per game, and then Buckley, 6 boards, 5 assists, 15.5 points per game after being the main point guard over at Southeast Louisiana. But then you've got Churchill Abis, who is over at Wake Forest, and DePaul over the last few seasons, and MJ Thomas, really the lone holdover from a season ago. They've been able to combine for about 13 rebounds per game. It is a New Orleans team that they're giving up a few second and third chances as well, outside the top 3 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but teams are shooting less than 30% from 3-point range against them. It is a New Orleans team that they themselves are outside the top 3 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, and it's a New Orleans team that they're outside the top 320 in terms of ball security, not really forcing a lot of turnovers themselves. So do you think that you're going to be able to get some points up on the board? I recognize that Memphis not necessarily playing as up-tempo as they have in past years, about 139th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. New Orleans, they're a little bit of a quicker team, 65th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So do you think that both offenses get a little bit more online here? Semi-total 155.5. We'll take those points with New Orleans, and I'm in on the under 36.557, 36.558. Vermont is on the road against Oregon State. Oregon State a 1.5 to a 2.5 point favorite. 145.5 to 146.5 is the total line. Set at a total of 138. I like the under. Vermont over the last 10 years has not clocked in inside the top 270 in terms of total possessions per game. They're consistently one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. Only reason why they're within the top 270 right now is because they played that double overtime game against Brown. They're still playing a very slow pace, and Oregon State is right now 241st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so they're relatively slow and controlled, and you've had an Oregon State team that's turned the ball over 13.5 times per game, so they're having an issue there. Now, good news is they face off against a Vermont team that's outside the top 330 in terms of generating turnovers, and I do think that there's going to be a little bit of regression with Vermont shooting 38.5% from three, albeit they face an Oregon State team that's been very much below average in terms of guarding the three-point line. Gus Yalden, ever since he became eligible, he's been able to shoot 47.5% from three, 18 points per game. I think it might have been a little bit of an injury thing, but I mean, he had 6'7", 6'8", began his career over at Wisconsin, Seton. He's been very rock solid. It's a Vermont team that has done a nice job in terms of not allowing second and third chances as well. Top 40 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are only grabbing about 7.5 offensive rebounds per game. Vermont right now allowing teams to shoot 36.5% from three, but they make up for it with the TJs. TJ Hurley, 14 points per game, shooting 42% from three. TJ Long, 38% three-point shooter, 17.5 points per game. And on the flip side of things, you do have an Oregon State team that they lose a lot of guys from a season ago, but Josiah Lake has done a nice job being Mr. Versatile with about 12 points, 3 assists, 5 rebounds per game. This team has a lot of size, but they haven't really utilized it. Your top rebounder is Jonan Munch, who's been able to come in from Denmark, give the team 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. They're giving the 7-footer Noah Ammenhauser more minutes as well. He's only been able to give the team 3 rebounds per game. Think that goes northward. And Stephen Olawani, along with Ore Diaz-Graham, these are guys with size that just have not seen a lot of minutes with Olawani due to injury for our good friend in Diaz-Graham, just ineffective play in general. But I do think that for this Oregon State team, they see a little bit of rise with their current 32.5% three-point shooting. And Des White, along with Malcolm Christie, have looked a little bit better. Christie is starting to bomb it from three after he only shot about 30% from three at Oakland last year. And White, last year over at Missouri State, he was rock solid. 14 points, 2.5 assists, steal per contest, and now he's giving the team 9.5 points. He's done a nice job giving the team 9+ points in 4 of the last 5 games. I do think that the long trip from Vermont to Corvallis is going to take it out of this Vermont team a little bit, and I do think that Oregon State finds a way to get the job done in a nip and tuck game. Set my line at 4, willing to lay with Oregon State, and I'm in on the under, set my total 138, and wrap things up with 306.559, 36.560. San Francisco plays us in North Alabama. North Alabama, a 14.5 point underdog, 144.5 to 145.5 is the total. Did set a total of a 148. I do like the over. Now for North Alabama, currently outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, but you've got a Dons of San Francisco team that they've been able to do a nice job with regards to their offensive efficiency. They themselves, San Francisco, hovering in the neighborhood about 279th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But Ryan Beasley, after he was cold for the first 3 or 4 games of the season, he's picked it up offensively, shooting in the mid-30s from 3, 13.5 points, 3 assists per game. Mookie Cook, who comes over from Oregon, he has been tremendous. 12 points, 5 boards, steal per contest. It's a San Francisco team that year in and year out, they typically check in the top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. A little bit below that this year. They are allowing teams to shoot 35% from 3. They've been very strong with regards to their interior defense, and with this North Alabama team, it's been a little bit more the opposite. They have been allowing a lot of open 2-point looks, even though you do have a guy that has been very good with regards to his raw numbers, Cornelius Williams. He's been able to give you 14 points, about 10.5 rebounds per game. This team is outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and it is a squad that has been allowing teams to shoot 36% from 3-point range as well. For North Alabama, though, I think that they're going to be able to hold in there with Dallas Howell at 6'7", give you good versatility. 2 years ago, shot nearly 40% for 3 right now. Only give the team 8 points per game. Missed all of last year due to injury, but he's been easing his way back. And then Dante Backus along Kevin Dekovic has been able to both give you 13.5 points per game, a combined 4 assists per contest. For North Alabama, they're not really going to generate a lot of turnovers, so that'll help out the fact that San Francisco has been turning the ball over 13 times per game, but I do think that for North Alabama, they do a nice job grabbing some second and third chances with Cornelius Williams down low. I like what Keenan Keenan Jefferson has been able to give you with about 11 points, pair of assists, steal per contest with North Alabama. Did set them as an underdog of 14 points. We've seen them be pesky against the likes of a Clemson, against Mississippi State, so I'm going to take them on the road with the points, and I'm in on the over. Set my total 148, and that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, they meet us on Matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm going to be with you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.